After the guard left, Li Shimin asked, "Father, could it be that this tobacco leaf is—" Li Shimin pointed to the wooden box with cigarettes on the table. Li Yuan laughed and nodded. "It's this thing, there's no mistake. Previously I asked this kid. He said that there will be a large number of tobacco leaves coming in a period of time. When the time comes, this cigarette can be mass-produced. This is actually something that I found out through his father-in-law's blessing." While speaking, Li Yuan couldn't help but laugh strangely. Li Shimin, Zhang Sun, and Wu Go also looked at each other and smiled. After that, Li Shimin said, "You all eat first. This son will go and deal with this matter." "Wait." Li Yuan interrupted Li Shimin and said, "This matter, it's better for me to deal with it. That kid is very sneaky. However, this kid lives in my villa. He has to give me some compensation. Otherwise, I will feel unhappy when I think of this matter." Li Shimin was a little speechless when he heard this. However, he still bowed and said, "Then I will have to trouble father. By the way, didn't father just say that Zhang Feng, that kid, left in a huff? Could it be that he is still in the city?" Li Yuan nodded and said, "He received hundreds of thousands of strings of money. Now, those bastards from the Ministry of Works and Ministry of Rights have created such a mess. It would be strange if Zhang Feng isn't anxious. However, this is also good. This time, he is like a donkey. He won't leave even if we chase him away. Right now, he is probably thinking of some new tricks in that rubber factory." Li Shimin's expression became slightly cold when he heard this. "How about I will?" "No." Li Yuan shook his head and said, "This matter, have you found out who did it?" Li Shimin shook his head. Li Yuan asked again, "Then who do you think is the most likely?" "Guanlong?" Li Shimin was certain of this, because everything that had happened before was related to Guanlong, and the Imperial College was basically under the control of the Guanlong 8 great clans. There were also quite a few of their people in the Bureau of Works and Bureau of Officials. At this time, for this matter to happen, it was impossible for them to escape responsibility. Seeing the two people chatting happily, Zhang Sun and Wu Go quietly brought all the palace maids and eunuchs out of the imperial garden. However, Li Shimin and Li Yuan did not notice. While Li Yuan smoked, he shook the wine pot that he extorted from Zhang Feng and said, "You are right. Guanlong's people also think this way. Therefore, I feel that this matter has nothing to do with Guanlong." Li Yuan's gaze turned cold. He looked at Li Shimin and said, "Do you still remember last time, when you removed people from the Shandong aristocratic families and even removed them to Longyu?" Li Shimin frowned and said, "Could it be that Father Emperor means that the Shandong aristocratic families have created some trouble again?" Chapter 961. At this time, Zhang Feng was immersed in the design of the rugby ball. This thing was different from a basketball. It didn't need to be very elastic. It was similar to the material of a kuju, but it had to be a little softer. Zhang Feng had seen kuju before. It was simply a bamboo strip wrapped in a thick layer of cowhide. This thing was really useless. The bamboo strip was made 3 times, but each time it was unsatisfactory. With great difficulty, Zhang Feng finalized the bamboo strip and the rugby ball's general situation. Then, he plunged his head out of the workshop and breathed in the smell of nature. That feeling was like being reborn. At this time, little Gizi didn't wait for the carriage to stop. He shouted from afar, "Prince Zhang, Prince Zhang." Instantly, a chill ran down his spine. He had a déjà vu feeling like he had once seen a ladyboy throw coquettish glances at him on TV. Zhang Feng resisted the urge to vomit and hurriedly retreated several steps until he leaned against the wall. Zhang Feng was an extremely cultured person. When he saw little Gizi in front of him, he stood up straight and calmly made a posture that looked like he could sprint 100 meters at any time. He asked, "Isn't this Gizi? It's rare to see you come alone." After all, little Gizi was used to seeing all kinds of people around Li Shimin. When he saw Zhang Feng like this, he was a little surprised, but still said, "Prince Zhang, what are you talking about? The things I do, even if I add up 8 lifetimes together, are not enough for Prince Zhang." Zhang Feng was too lazy to talk to him. The key point was that he couldn't resist the feminine voice. He asked bluntly, "Did something happen to Lao Li?" If Lao Li hadn't sent him here, Zhang Feng wouldn't have believed that he would come looking for him even if he was beaten to death. Xiao Gizi coughed and looked at Zhang Feng meaningfully, which made Zhang Feng's hair stand on end. Xiao Gizi said slowly, "Does Prince Zhang not know what happened in Chang, in city today?" "What do I know?" Zhang Feng was a little confused. It seems that Prince Zhang really doesn't know. 4 hours ago, a group of barbarian merchants arrived in Chang and city. Zhang Feng nodded and asked, "And then?" Xiao Gizi glanced in the direction of the entrance of Tonghui Lane and said, "But until now, the merchants' convoy has been entering Chang and city one after the other. It is said that they are transporting tobacco. There are more tobacco outside the city than in Chang and city. They are waiting to enter the city. Second Master hurriedly asked me to inform Prince Zhang. At this time, they have basically taken control of the convoy outside the city gate. This has caused congestion in Chang and city. If they enter the city and attract the attention of those big shots, it will be bad." Zhang Feng was stunned for a few seconds. He sucked in a breath of cold air and asked, "You're saying that these carts are transporting tobacco?" Suddenly, Zhang Feng remembered that he had given a handful of banknotes to a barbarian merchant at the Shao Mountain Market. As for how much he had given, he had really forgotten. He had only told him to buy as much as he could according to the amount of banknotes. Zhang Feng couldn't help but ask hurriedly, "Do you know how many carts of tobacco there are now?" "Who knows? But won't you know if you go and take a look?" Xiao Gizi spread out his hands and said, "Old Master Li also knows about this. He is now waiting for you in your house." In the eyes of the Tangs, tobacco was the same as the leaves outside the city. Most of them were just bigger leaves. With so many leaves entering the city, it would be strange if they didn't panic. At this moment, Niu Weili ran over breathlessly, holding his sky-blue official's robe. As he ran, he shouted, "Prince Zhang, I've finally found you. Hurry up and take a look. The Imperial Guards have been alerted. This time, the whole Chang and Avenue is in a mess. If you don't go, God knows what will happen." Zhang Feng was shocked when he heard this. He said, "You won't let them go to Shao Mountain?" Niu Weili became even more anxious when he heard this. That damned bastard came from Mount Shao. Tingshuo was driven out by the people outside Mount Shao. There are so many things here. Anyone who sees them will feel uncomfortable. You should go and take a look. Otherwise, there will be a big problem. Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel anxious. Damn it. He didn't expect that there would be so many tobacco leaves. So many of them. Could it be that those things were really worthless in the return receipt? Were they really as cheap as leaves and grass? Zhang Feng hurriedly followed Niu Weili to Chang and city while thinking about what to do with so many things. If they were targeted by bad guys, they didn't need to do anything. They only needed to light a match and the whole Chang and city would be burned to the ground. Zhang Feng really couldn't bear this crime. At this time, at the intersection of Chang and city and the Vermilion Bird Gate, the Imperial Guards were ready. The long sabers at their waists and the long spears in their hands were all erected. Even the Vermilion Bird Gate was closed. Numerous archers were on the city gate. All of them had Xianxia arrows and were ready for battle. The leader of the guards was a strong man in golden armor. He stared indifferently at a bearded businessman in front of the carriages and said, "I'll give you 10 minutes to get these damn things out of the city. Otherwise, all your goods and all your people will die today." Chapter 962. Why? We are all honest merchants, and these goods belong to your people. The people at the foot of Shao Mountain ordered us to transport all of them to Chang and city. Look, this is the approval from the military officer over there. We didn't dare to delay along the way because we were afraid that Prince Zhang would be anxious from waiting. That's why we came here. Get ready. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, the golden-armored Jinwu Guard General waved his hand. In an instant, the guards at the city gate and on top of the city gate were all prepared for battle. The onlookers were so scared that they retreated one after another. The merchant who had returned the message was also a little scared. At this moment, a palanquin slowly came out of the gate. A cold voice shouted, "Stop! What are you doing? Hurry up and stop, old man." When the Jinwu Guard General heard this voice, he frowned slightly. However, he still waved his hand. Only then did the guards at the city gate release their bows and arrows. Wei Jing rushed over as soon as he heard about this. Fortunately, he came in time. Otherwise, all of them would have been finished. Wei Jing stuck a fake beard on his face, making his original beard longer. Moreover, there were 2 more grayish-white whiskers below his temples. He checked himself with a bronze mirror. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he walked out of the palanquin. The Jinwu guard had already known about Wei Zheng's and the others' attire. Although he was a little surprised, he wasn't too shocked. The Jinwu guard general cupped his fists and said, "Elder Wei, you came at the right time. Look at how improper this is. What if there is an emergency military situation and we are delayed?" Don't worry. Let me deal with this matter." Wei Jing touched his beard indifferently. He looked at the merchant who had already been scared silly and said, "The goods themselves need to be handed over to the employer." "Is the employer in the imperial city?" "No, but there are too many goods. If we don't hurry up and enter the city, we won't be able to afford the loss if the goods outside the city are damaged when the sky turns dark." "Sir, please tell me. I've come all the way to Chang and from afar. I'm so hungry and thirsty that the horses that were pulling the goods have been starving for 2 days. I just want to settle the goods as soon as possible and find some food to eat. You must uphold justice for us." As he spoke, all the merchants who had returned knelt in front of Wei Zheng. Wei Zheng had always been upright and plain-spoken. How could he get used to such a situation? How was the merchant at fault? Needless to say, the tobacco leaf must be the raw material for the cigarettes that Zhang Feng had made. This kid had mentioned it before, so when he heard about the tobacco leaf, he quickly rushed over before anyone else. If someone else were to come, or if the nobles were to get ahead of them, then things were going to be tricky. Wei Zheng frowned and asked, "Why don't we just transport the camels to Mount Baron, instead of coming directly to Chang'an?" When the merchant who had returned heard this, he became even more indignant as he pointed outside the city and said, "Isn't there a Chang'an garrison at the foot of Mount Baron? After seeing so many carriages, they refused to let us in no matter what. They even said that Prince Zhang was in the city and told us to look for him in the city. That's why we came to Chang'an City. Damn you, Qigong. What the hell are you doing? Don't you know that these things belong to Fengzi?" Wei Zheng suppressed his anger and said, "Since you found me, old man will take over this matter for you. Is the Prince Zhang you're talking about the dean of White Deer College, Zhang Feng?" The merchant who had returned didn't know Zhang Feng's name. He had only heard everyone call him Prince Zhang. When he heard this, he hurriedly nodded his head. Those who were hiding far away also heard their conversation and couldn't help but be shocked. "What? These things belong to the Prince Zhang of White Deer College? Oh my God, no wonder. I was wondering how anyone could collect tree leaves. It turns out that it's him. Haha, some time ago, I heard that he collected a large number of black and swarthy war beasts from a barbarian merchant. I don't know what he's up to. I've also heard that someone on Shao Mountain is really collecting tree leaves and bamboo leaves. Could it be that Child Zhang and Dean Zhang are the ones who have decided on these things?" As the discussion continued, Yi Zichen was stunned. The crowd couldn't help but sigh. "You should have said so earlier. There are so many tree leaves outside the city. Why would he travel thousands of miles to collect things from foreign barbarians?" "Stop. Come on, Prince Zhang. He's a god who descended to the mortal world. How can you speculate about him? If Prince Zhang said that these leaves are useful, then they must be very useful. Don't talk nonsense if you don't understand." While the crowd was discussing, Zhang Feng hurriedly squeezed through the crowd. This scene caused another round of exclamations from the crowd. After all, Zhang Feng was now a very popular person in Chang'an City. The exclamations from the other side instantly gave Wei Zheng and the merchant a glimmer of hope. Zhang Feng clenched his fists and asked the crowd to make way. Then he saw the situation at the city gate and old Wei who was negotiating. He hurriedly said, "Oh, old Wei, I'm sorry. If it weren't for you, I don't know how to end things today." Then Zhang Feng took out a bamboo tube and handed it to the guard in golden armor. The guard glanced at it and saw that it was actually that kind of cigarette. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He didn't know whether to accept it or not. Zhang Feng ignored him and said, "Oh, soldier, this is all a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. Please calm down. This box of cigarettes is for the brothers to calm down. If you don't have enough, you can go to Tong Hui Fang Yulai restaurant to get more. That's my business." Chapter 963. Who else could wear the golden armor? Although Zhang Feng didn't mention it, who else could command the guards of the Vermilion Bird Gate other than the Jinwu guards? At this time, this idiot had occupied the entire Vermilion Bird Gate. If he wasn't caught, it would already be a blessing from the gods. Zhang Feng hadn't seen the Jinwu guards, but Zhang Feng's name was like thunder in the palace. The Jinwu guard commander subconsciously put away the cigarette in his hand and said, "Prince Zhang, this is because of your face. If it was someone else, no matter what the goods here are, you should know the rules. Since this idiot doesn't know the rules, this time we will let him go. However, with so many things, what are you going to use them for?" The commander of the Jinwu guards was well aware of what had happened in the palace just now. After receiving this news, the emperor didn't even need to eat. What did this mean? However, the Jinwu guard commander couldn't figure out the use of these things for a long time. In the end, he waved his hand and thanked Zhang Feng before hurriedly returning to the imperial city. After he left, Zhang Feng's mind became active, and the courage of the people present finally grew. When Zhang Feng and Wei Zheng were about to speak, the merchant interrupted the two and said gratefully, "Prince Zhang, it's all thanks to you. If it weren't for you, I would have really caused a disaster. However, these things are really urgent. Originally, these things weren't worth much, but the autumn rain is coming. As the saying goes, autumn rain is as precious as oil. Once I return, I will desperately buy these leaves. I can only tell you that there are less than half of the tobacco leaves here, and there are more. If we don't transport them quickly, they will rot in the ground or be burned into fertilizer by those damn people." Zhang Feng hurriedly interrupted the merchant and said, "I didn't make it clear before. How about this? You take these things to Mount Shao immediately. I'll ask someone to take you there later." Before Zhang Feng finished, Wei Jing patted Zhang Feng's shoulder and said, "Master Li is waiting for you. Let's wait for a while. It's not urgent to bring so many things to Shao Mountain. We'd better go and discuss a proper way." Why was everyone talking about the old man? This old man was simply everywhere he could earn money. Zhang Feng was furious. However, he still admitted defeat. "Well, wait a minute. Ask your worker to go to a restaurant with the words Chang, an academy, on the signboard. I'll pay for the meal. You just need to tell him. How about that?" While speaking, Zhang Feng and Wei Jing both got into Wei Zheng's sedan and hurriedly left. It was the first time for Zhang Feng to sit in Wei Zheng's sedan. The sedan was very large and spacious. Two people sitting side by side didn't feel crowded at all. In the middle of the sedan, there was a wooden table fixed on the floor of the sedan. There was a bronze mirror on it. At this moment, Zhang Feng's interest was greatly aroused. "Old Wei, I didn't expect you to use a mirror." Wei Jing blushed. He just hurriedly hid the official robe and didn't put away the mirror. However, who was Wei Jing? He laughed and said, "I forgot to put it away when I was growing my beard. Let's not talk about this. Don't tell me these tobacco leaves are the raw material for making cigarettes? You don't believe me?" Zhang Feng spread his hands and pointed to the cigarettes on the table. He said, "If you don't believe me, you can smell this and the tobacco leaves. By the way, you seem to have smoked that cigar, right?" Wei Zheng was simply stunned. When did old man smoke a cigar? Zhang Feng patted his forehead. He really forgot that this thing seemed to have been smoked by the four great scholars and Chintinu. Yes, it seemed that there was also old Master Li. Wei Jing stared and couldn't help but lift the curtain of the sedan. He looked outside the window at the rows of carriages full of tobacco leaves. His eyelids couldn't help but twitch. "You have so many. How are you going to make them? I mean, what are you going to do? I remember that you only bought one or a few carriages of tobacco leaves at the foot of the mountain. This is enough for us to use. You have so many. What are you going to do?" "If I have any plans, I don't have any for the time being." Zhang Feng shook his head and looked at his teeth in the mirror. He said, "But this thing is probably famous in Chang'an City now. Old Wei, What do you think about opening a cigarette factory? Zhang Feng waited for a long time, but Wei Jing didn't speak. Seeing that Wei Jing had been staring at him, he smiled and said, I know what you are thinking, old Wei. Do you know how much I spent to buy these things? Wei Jing didn't say anything. Zhang Feng sighed and felt speechless. Then he said, I only spent about 100 taels of silver or 10 taels of silver on these things. I can't remember clearly, but I guess a carriage should be worth 10 taels of silver. 100 taels of silver? Wei Zheng was shocked. It was at least 3 miles from Chang and city to the gate of the imperial city, and this was considered a straight road. Even if the carriage covered an area of 10 feet from here to the gate, and then there were the streets and alleys, and counting the distance of 3 miles, how many carriages would it be if a carriage was worth 10 taels of tobacco leaves? Hundreds of carriages? What about outside the city? Wouldn't it be thousands of carriages? Even if it was 1,000 carriages and 10,000 strings of cash, it was only 10 taels of silver. That was to say, if he calculated correctly, there were more tobacco leaves with the 100 taels of silver? Wei Jing remembered that the businessman just said there were more tobacco leaves. He couldn't help but be even more shocked. How much did this kid buy? How much did he spend? Zhang Feng smiled and looked at the shocked Wei Jing. He patted him on the shoulder. Then the dizzy Wei Jing followed Zhang Feng out of the sedan and entered the villa. As soon as he entered the villa, Zhang Feng saw Li Yuan practicing 5 animal frolics in the courtyard. After seeing Zhang Feng, he waved at him and said, Kid, tell me, what are you going to do about the things outside? Chapter 964. As soon as they entered the living room, Li Yuan also noticed Wei Zheng, who was like a thinker. He ignored him and looked at Zhang Feng and asked, Those tobacco leaves are the main raw material for this thing, right? Li Yuan pointed to the cigarettes on the table and asked. Zhang Feng nodded. Isn't this obvious? You still have to ask? He really wanted to make a sign and hang it in front of his chest. It would say that the tobacco leaves that suddenly appeared in Chang and city are the raw material for cigarettes. To explain this, 1 or 2 people were still okay. Once there were many people and he saw each person, he would be annoyed to death. Li Yuan lit a cigarette and played with it in his hand. I just heard that the person who replied said that there are still a lot of these things. Where are the people who are planning to use them to fertilize the land? Don't you plan to get some seeds and plant them yourself? As for the use of this thing, as long as these people send the goods up the mountain, they will definitely know what it is for. How many more tobacco leaves do you think they will send you later? Zhang Feng said with certainty, You don't have to worry about this. I only spent about 100 taels of silver. Even if it is more, Zhang Feng can still take it out. However, even if they know the use of this thing, so what? In this world Zhang Feng, dare to say that other than me no one wants it. Besides, even if they know the manufacturing method of cigarettes, but Zhang Feng smiled slyly and said, You, old Master Li, are also a wily old fox. Don't tell me you don't have this bit of business sense? Li Yuan laughed. He knew what kind of business this was. If he liked it, he only needed to send an edict to the king's tent. Would he dare to not give it? Li Yuan glanced at Zhang Feng and said, Don't interrupt, kid. Let's talk about this first. Normally, even the cigarettes that we use are stolen. Why did you spend so much capital this time? Do you want to do something big? Li Yuan was too lazy to beat around the bush. Zhang Feng, this bastard, would definitely drag him into this. This brat definitely knew the purpose of his visit, but it had been so long since he entered the door, and this brat still didn't mention it. He was prepared to beat around the bush. Zhang Feng chuckled and said, Don't worry, let's talk about what to do with these tobacco leaves first. No. Who are you trying to fool? Do you think I don't know what you're planning? But let me remind you, once this thing goes up Mount Shao, you might as well throw it away if you want to survive the autumn rain. Zhang Feng rolled his eyes. Even if I throw away Lao Tzu, I won't let you off so easily. But this thing was very expensive. Zhang Feng really couldn't bear to throw it away. Zhang Feng couldn't help but sigh and say, Then tell me, what do we do with this thing? Even Chang and city couldn't hold it. If I don't get it to Mount Shao before tomorrow, His Majesty will send someone to invite me to the prison to be caned. Hearing this, Li Yuan leaned closer to Zhang Feng and said, "You really want to hear my thoughts? You can choose to remain silent." Zhang Feng spread his hands. Obviously, he underestimated Li Yuan's thick skin. Li Yuan smoked and said neither quickly nor slowly, "Chung, and can't hold it, but I know that Erlang's people are preparing to go to Luozhou East Palace right now to carry out repairs. If we can take the opportunity to transfer the goods to them and let them take it to Luozhou, then it'll be easy to handle. After all, Luozhou is vast and sparsely populated. It's not afraid of having too many things, but it's afraid of having too few things. My Li family's largest warehouse is in Luozhou City. If it really doesn't work, there are hundreds of acres of wasteland. That place is enough for us to toss around. What do you think? Cigarettes are a good thing. As you said, although there aren't many people who can smoke cigarettes in Chang and City now, the news about cigarettes has long been spread like a miracle. If we sell cigarettes to the people at this time, it's the best time. Moreover, Luozhou is far from Chang, and unlike Chang and where there are spies all over the world." Zhang Feng hurriedly interrupted Li Yuan. He was a little confused. Almost disturbed by Li Yuan, he hurriedly asked, "Old master, I'm afraid of you, okay? Can you just pick the important things to say?" Li Yuan was also a little innocent. Imitating Zhang Feng, he spread his hands and said, "Didn't I learn all this from you? Old master, let's talk nicely. Let's not bicker, okay?" Zhang Feng suppressed the blood in his heart and said with a stiff face, "You want to talk about the expansion of tobacco business, right?" How could he not know what old Master Li wanted to say? This guy almost wanted to trick him again. However, how could Zhang Feng be so easily fooled? Under Zhang Feng's insistence, Li Yuan finally smacked his lips and tactfully stopped talking about this matter. Instead, he asked, "How much is the cost of these cigarettes?" Zhang Feng immediately became alert. "Why are you asking this? Isn't it because of this matter you caused that made His Majesty very angry?" At noon, several ministers wanted to enter the palace, but they were forcibly blocked outside by these people. After 2 hours, His Majesty became impatient and gave each of them a beating. Tell me, how can these people not be angry? At this time, Erlang was wandering around in these people's mansions. Otherwise, why would these people care if you're a viscount, the chancellor of Chang'an University, or even the dean of White Deer College? These people were beaten, they have to get back their face. Do you think you can deal with this group of old foxes? Zhang Feng thought about it carefully. It really was true. The Jinwu guards were all dispatched. Although he didn't know what position the Jinwu guards held, that golden armor, the words that person said, and the things that person did could be seen. Could it be that His Majesty was really angry? Chapter 965. In addition, there was a ban in Chang. After pondering for a while, Zhang Feng was really frightened. He hurriedly said, "Old master, tell me, what should we do about this?" Li Yuan was delighted. But he still said calmly, "In fact, it's very simple, but I really don't know where the selling point of this cigarette is. You first tell me, what are you going to do with so many tobacco leaves? Do you still need to ask? Isn't this to make cigarettes?" Zhang Feng did not finish his words and hurriedly shut up, but it was too late. Li Yuan had already gotten what he wanted. He smiled and patted Zhang Feng on the shoulder and said, "Yes. You made this thing to sell, so this is business. But now in Chang, and you don't have to think about it. You will definitely be targeted. Then we have to think of a foolproof plan. You don't have to think about Shaoshan. It's not safe to set up a tobacco factory there. You said you opened an academy. What will others think if you do so many side businesses? Even if you really want to do side businesses, you have to find a place where no one is. Making a fortune in silence is also the way of the king. Otherwise, if you do it so ostentatiously, it will inevitably arouse the disgust of those ministers. At that time, don't say who you have a good relationship with, those people want to mess with you. Even the Lord Zhangsun can't wait by your side all day long. Don't you think this makes sense? Well, Zhang Feng was really stunned. The current situation was unclear, and someone was secretly messing with him. For the time being, he did not know who was doing this. Even if he knew, he could not do anything. Seeing Zhang Feng's situation, Li Yuan struck while the iron was hot and said, You see, the autumn rain is about to fall. When the weather is wet, these tobacco leaves will be damp after all. Once they are damp, do you think the taste of the tobacco will change? So, I think with so many tobacco leaves with your current manpower, even if you don't eat or sleep to make it, you can't finish it in a year. But there is such a big piece of meat in Chang'an City. Do you want to let it rot and not let these people eat it? Stop. Zhang Feng hurriedly shouted to stop. If I let the old man continue, would he ask me to commit suicide to atone for my sins? Zhang Feng speechlessly wiped the cold sweat and saliva off his face. He leaned back quietly and said, "Old master, if you have something to say, we can talk about it properly. If you want to put the tobacco factory in Luozhou, then let it be in Luozhou. You have the final say, okay? As long as we split the profits 50-50, you can do whatever you want with the rest." When Li Yuan heard this, he smacked his lips in satisfaction. He deliberately took out Zhang Feng's flask from his bosom and drank a mouthful of wine in front of Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng gritted his teeth, but there was nothing he could do. After all, he didn't like to use things that had been used by others. At this time, after the matter was finalized, Li Yuan said earnestly, "Boy, don't think that you have suffered a loss. You should know that what I brought down for you is endless trouble. You should prepare for your mid-autumn hunt with peace of mind. That is the big thing. As long as this matter is done, then everything will be fine, you know?" When it came to business, Li Yuan couldn't help but worry. "Boy, do you have confidence in this mid-autumn hunt? If it's really not possible, I'll find some connections for you." This mid-autumn hunt, he really couldn't help much. After all, there were some things that he could use the retired emperor, and even Li Shimin could use his connections. But this mid-autumn hunt and this mid-autumn poetry meet, they really couldn't intervene. At most, they could strictly guard against accidents. The key was still to see the strength of this mid-autumn hunt. To put it bluntly, if you didn't have the strength to prove your existence, even if you had more people to help, it would be useless. Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, "No need. If I can't even handle this matter, then wouldn't I, Zhang Feng, be too useless? Even if I become the champion of this mid-autumn hunt, what's the use? I, Zhang Feng, really don't care about this." Li Yuan smacked his lips and didn't say anything. He just gave a thumbs up. "Then I'll wait here for the sound of your triumphant return. By the way, I heard this morning that your basketball was rejected. Are you sure you don't need me to use my connections?" This matter was obviously targeted by someone. Otherwise, how could those people still make such a conclusion when they knew the magic of this basketball? The emergence of every new thing was bound to have endless people who wanted to drown this thing in the world of mortals. The emergence of a thing was bound to affect the interests of a large number of people. This was the situation of basketball at this time. If he wanted to push it, he had to defeat those who pushed and dragged it, and not let it appear. Looking at Li Yuan, Zhang Feng wanted to say his thoughts, but he felt that it would be endless. It was like a chicken talking to a duck. Zhang Feng was too lazy to say anything. It wouldn't be too late to talk about other things after the rugby ball and the jersey appeared. Otherwise, he would be the one to suffer in this mid-autumn hunt. After all, the matter of the academy had caused an uproar. There were imperial edicts and so on. If at this time he couldn't get the first place in this mid-autumn hunt, it would be too embarrassing. Chapter 966. 5 o'clock. The sun was slowly moving to the west. The sun after autumn was called the 24 Tigers of Autumn at this time. Its power was simply incredible. At night, it was so cold that one couldn't wait to put on a jacket. But at noon, one couldn't wait to strip off everything on one's body. Zhang Feng hated sitting in a sedan chair. Although it could avoid the glaring sun, it also made him lose a lot of interest. For example, watching the people running on the basketball court on the street. For example, the strange food on the street that was tempting. Every time, even if he looked at it for a long time, his mood would be different, and the things he saw would be even more different. On the sedan chair, Zhang Feng was holding a rugby ball in his arms. Wearing sunglasses, he looked here and there. There was a gentle smile on his face, which charmed the young girls on the street and made them scream. At this time, when the sedan chair had just arrived at the city gate, a familiar sedan chair appeared in front of Zhang Feng. and there seemed to be some dispute at the city gate in front of him. At this time, the city gate was blocked. Zhang Feng was too lazy to pay attention to it. He played with the rugby ball while chatting with the people on the street. Occasionally, he would recite a poem. Instantly, the people who were still waiting in line to leave the city burst into a burst of exclamations. The noise here made the city gate guard angry. He knocked on the Modeo a few times and roared, "What are you all arguing about? Do you still want to leave the city? If you don't, get the F***CK out of the city." The guard's angry roar came to an abrupt end the moment he saw Zhang Feng. Then, like a dog, he hurriedly grinned and said, "Yo, isn't this Prince Zhang? Are you going out of the city? Come, 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 the people in front, make way. Make way for Prince Zhang." Prince Zhang? The people at the city gate were shocked. And the beauty sitting in the sedan chair trembled all over. At this time, in the midst of the commotion at the city gate, Zhang Feng couldn't help but put down his legs and sit up straight. He recognized it. Wasn't this the sedan chair that Yu often rode when she went to find him? Could it be? He suddenly thought of what Wuxia had said last night, and his heart ached. Was she really going back to Jiangnan? Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel a little anxious. However, there were too many people here. He really couldn't ask Yu here. He could only helplessly urge the sedan bearers to quickly leave the city. When they passed by Yu's sedan, Zhang Feng and Wuxia, who was in the sedan, were unusually nervous. It was as if they had been caught having an affair. But in the end, Zhang Feng was still defeated by reason. He sighed and walked out of the city gate. Once he was out of the city, Zhang Feng looked at the fork in the road and asked, "Which road leads to Jiangnan?" The sedan bearer was stunned when he heard this. His eyes rolled as he said, "If you want to wait for someone, the Wei River is a good place. Why don't I stop there for you? Once you're done, I'll pick you up." As a palanquin bearers who often worked at Shao Mountain, how could they not know about the affairs of this esteemed dean? As for other things, they might not know or recognize them. They might not know about fine porcelain and the like, and they might not even know how to read big words. However, they could tell you all day about the types of palanquins and carriages they were familiar with. At this time, even if Zhang Feng didn't say anything, they all knew what Zhang Feng wanted to do. After all, they had seen Wuxia come and go in this sedan chair in front of the tavern in Tonghui Lane. Now that they saw Prince Zhang's expression, who didn't know what was going on? Zhang Feng couldn't help but blush when he heard this, tacitly agreeing with their words. After the Wei River stopped, Zhang Feng gave each of them a banknote. After the four left, he seriously looked at the Wei River in front of him. This was the historical location of the Wei River Alliance. Although more than a year had passed on the wooden bridge that could accommodate 3 carriages side by side, the scars left behind by hatchets still served as a reminder of the pain and suffering in his heart. The turbid water beneath the bridge was mixed with tree branches that had been washed down from the depths of the Qinling Mountains. At this time, a faint fragrance caused Zhang Feng to turn around. But in the next moment he couldn't help but fall into a daze. Behind him was the silhouette of the Qinling Mountains and Shao Mountain. Wuxia was wearing a pink muslin dress, her beautiful face tinged with sorrow. In his infatuation, Zhang Feng felt as if his heart had been ruthlessly hammered. Zhang Feng asked in a daze. Wuxia, on the other hand, smiled faintly. 2 drops of sparkling and translucent tears fell from her drooping eyes onto the bridge under Zhang Feng's feet. Wuxia held back her tears. When she raised her head, although her eyes were still red, they had long since disappeared. "The wind is so strong today." Wuxia smiled and couldn't stop crying again. Zhang Feng's heart ached. He reached out to hug her, but Wuxia stubbornly took a step back and said with a smile, "Prince Zhang, please conduct yourself with dignity." Zhang Feng smacked his lips and sighed. Wuxia was right. What was he now? Was he her husband? Or what? He was nothing. What right did he have to hug her? Zhang Feng bitterly smiled, then he withdrew his hand and said, "Can you not go? Old Master Li and the others here are no longer against you." "No need. Chang, and isn't suitable for me. I'm a little tired. I want to go back and rest. I want to think about what happened during this period." When I've thought things through, or when you have a home of your own, you can come and fetch me on a palanquin. Chapter 967. Yuqiu are still left. Zhang Feng was a little disappointed. He didn't want the first woman of the Tang dynasty to get involved in his affairs. Yu was very smart. She should have known that he had met those nobles and the current crisis. She was also anxious because he had asked her to help him find out if there was any connection between the nobles in Jiangnan and the nobles in Shandong. Otherwise, she wouldn't have left so quietly without even giving him a hug. Zhang Feng stood on the bridge for a long time with a little heartache. The sun, from its dazzling color, hung over the top of the mountain and slowly set at the end of the Wei River between Mount Shao and Qinling. Only an incomparably gorgeous afterglow was left. Young Master Zhang, shouldn't we go back? At this time, the sedan bearer seemed to be impatient and came forward to ask hesitantly. Zhang Feng sighed and threw the cigarette butt in his hand into the Wei River. Finally, he took a look at Yu, who had disappeared into the boundless fog, and said lightly, "Wait for me. After I destroy the 5 families and 7 kingdoms, after I destroy these big families, I, Zhang Feng, swear to give you the most glorious wedding in the Tang dynasty." While Zhang Feng was murmuring in a low voice, Yu Qigong came over helplessly and stood beside Zhang Feng. After waving his hand to let the sedan bearer leave, he handed a cigarette to Zhang Feng and said, "Let's go. It's getting late." "Do you think it's dangerous for her to go back this time?" Looking at Zhang Feng's back, Yu Qigong wanted to pat him on the shoulder, but this guy couldn't take a beating. He could only sigh and say, "No. After all, my cousin's family has some prestige in Jiangnan. I've found dozens of retired soldiers and sent them to her. You don't have to worry about her safety. Lao Li and the others have already arranged it. But since you don't want her to go, why don't you let her stay?" Zhang Feng smiled bitterly and patted Yu Qigong's shoulder. "Thanks, old Yu." As he slowly walked towards Yu Qigong's sedan, Zhang Feng said calmly, "There are many choices in a person's life. Some people choose to live peacefully, while others choose to protect. Let's go, old Yu. I respect her choice. I also believe that distance is not a problem. I understand her and she understands me." Yu Qigong looked at Zhang Feng's back with a wry smile. He really couldn't understand how someone who liked to talk so much could attract so many women. At first, he was worried that Yuqiu would lead Zhang Feng into a dish. But now, it seemed that he was wrong. The emperor was wrong. The retired emperor was wrong. Everyone was wrong. Zhang Feng was simply a freak. As long as everyone was attracted by him, they would be unable to extricate themselves from being attracted to him. Even Yu Zhengnan's Yu Qimei was subdued by him. How could he not see that Yu Qiu had already lost her virginity? Jiangnan had never lacked handsome men, nor did it lack those who were brimming with talent. At the very least, they looked more outstanding than Zhang Feng. However, none of these men could make Yu Qiu lower her head. Today, she was actually willing to do so for Zhang Feng. Yu Qigong sighed and waved his hand. "Let's go. Let's go up the mountain." Yu Qigong really couldn't understand these two evildoers. Sometimes, Yu Qiu would make Feng Zi run away. Other times, Yu Qiu would be completely bewitched by Zhang Feng. Now, there was this hiccup. Not far away in the darkness, Li Shimin lifted the curtains to the palanquin. After watching Zhang Feng leave, Empress Zhang Sun said with reddened eyes, "Zhang Feng could have made you stay. Why did second brother stop me when I tried to persuade her to stay?" Li Shimin smiled faintly and waved his hand to indicate that they should return to the palace. "You still don't understand that kid's intentions? That kid and Yu Qiu are both shrewd people. Which one of them is the master of saving trouble? Yu Qiu's return to Jiangnan must have something to do with what Zhang Feng has encountered recently." Zhang Sun Wugo was stunned. "Second brother, are you saying that Yu is helping Zhang Feng find out about those landowning households?" Zhang Sun Wugo couldn't help but cover her mouth. Li Shimin nodded gravely. "If they don't put on a show for others to see, how will others believe that they have broken up? In this way, the landowning households in Shandong and Jiangnan will let down their guard, and Yu will have more pursuers than before when she returns. So, Guanyin maid, Zhang Feng and Yu Qiyu do have feelings for each other. However, at this time, Yu Qiyu should be a little more mature. Feng Zi is still a little impulsive, but this is also good. This show will be perfect. Hearing this, Zheng Sun Wugo exclaimed, could it be that all of this was done by you and father? Li Shimin nodded. There's also Yuqi. This idea was Yuqi's. Otherwise, it's just a woman. Do you think I'm so free to stop her and Feng Zi from having a good time? At this time, Zhang Sun Wugo finally came to her senses and exclaimed, could it be that Yu Qiyu did it on purpose? Chapter 968. The next morning, Cheng Chumo and the rest stood in front of Zhang Feng's wooden hut in fear, not daring to move an inch. Last night, after Zhang Feng returned to the mountain, everyone saw that his face was terrifyingly gloomy. Even Li Qingqian was scolded by Zhang Feng when he went up to ask. Then he called everyone over and scolded them fiercely. After everyone recited the multiplication and division table and the book of songs outside his wooden hut, he asked them to scram. When he left, this fiend actually asked everyone to report at his door early in the morning, before the morning exercise. If he did not see anyone, they were to scram immediately. This time, everyone's hair stood on end. Even Qian Wanli, who had been taking care of the paper-making business, was captured. The dozen or so young men stared at each other, not knowing what was going on. In the end, they asked Yu Qigong, who only gave them a piece of advice. Do not provoke Zhang Feng. This time, everyone was restless. This morning, before the sun rose, the dozen or so people rushed into the kitchen to grab a big bowl of leftovers and rushed over. However, no one dared to be careless. Not to mention standing straight, they did not even dare to fart. This was because, according to old He from the kitchen, the light in Feng Zi's hut was on for the entire night. What did this mean? This meant that Feng Zi did not sleep for the entire night. Perhaps he was watching them through the crack of the door. And that damned Shiva was the person that everyone wanted to beat the most. If you asked him what he was, he would only say 2 words. Don't know. If you asked again, he would not even acknowledge you. Li Chengqian was so angry that he secretly kicked Cheng Chumo and ordered him to beat Shiva up tonight. Just as everyone's legs turned to jelly and sweat appeared on their foreheads, the door finally opened. Once the door was opened, Zhang Feng's face was still gloomy. He stared at Shiva, who was squatting at the door, and said, have you prepared the armor I asked you to prepare? Ready. Zhang Feng nodded. Get someone to bring it over. Alright, you go too. Shiva wanted to cry, but Li Chengqian and the others were roaring excitedly in their hearts. Delightful, truly delightful. Today, basketball, Chen Tinyu, Chong Zi, Idiot Wei, Yu Baolin, and Chen Wanli, you guys don't need to practice anymore. I'll teach you guys something new. As for the rest of you, I'll give you 10 days. If you can't produce the results I want before the Mid-Autumn Hunt ends and the Mid-Autumn Festival, I don't care who you are, all of you can scram. This time, Li Qingqian and the others exploded. They wanted to ask, but didn't dare to. His face flushed red. However, the hearts of Cheng Chumo and the others sank to the bottom. They asked weakly, Fengzi? Kuf, Dean, what about us? He had known Zhang Feng for so long, but this was the first time he had seen Zhang Feng so angry. Li Chengqian and the others didn't know what Zhang Feng was trying to do. He asked Shiva to get the armor and then kicked them out. This obviously didn't make sense. Zhang Feng didn't hide anything. When everyone was impatient, he said, do you see that thing? When everyone heard this, they looked in the direction where Zhang Feng was pointing. They saw a flat basketball wrapped in cowhide at the entrance. Zhang Feng continued, this thing is called a rugby ball. Don't you guys like to hit people? Okay, from today onwards, I'll join you guys. We'll practice to the death. You have to learn this thing before the Mid-Autumn Hunt, which means in these 5 days. If you can't, the academy will be disbanded. Understand? How could they not understand? They had to understand even if they didn't. They had no choice. If they didn't understand now, they would be courting death. As he spoke, Zhang Feng looked at the boxes of armor carried by the students. He pointed at everyone and said, come up, one for each of you. Put them on properly. Then, Zhang Feng rushed to the door and waved at Cripple Wang and the others who followed him up last night. Cripple Wang led his 30 or so veterans and hurriedly ran over in formation. This scene attracted the attention of all the Imperial Guards who were disguised as guards on Shao Mountain. It also made Cheng Chumo, Li Chengqian, and the others feel alarmed. After all, the journey here wasn't far. In a few breaths, everyone arrived in front of Zhang Feng. Without waiting for Cripple Wang to introduce, Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, "You are all veterans. Naturally, you have a way to train people. Now that you've chosen to follow me, Zhang Feng, I'll give you your first task. Do you see these 5 people? I'll give you 5 days to train them." Among the 30 or so veterans, a few of them trembled when they saw Cheng Chumo. Wasn't this Lieutenant Cheng? How could he be a student here? And who would dare to train Lieutenant Cheng? But at this moment, the matter of eating was more important. They could only pretend not to know him. One of them, a man with a scar on his face, clasped his fist and asked, "Prince Zhang, how do we train these people? If it's just basic charging and killing, we can train them for you in less than 3 days. As long as you're willing, we can guarantee that they won't die." Chapter 969. Scarface looked suspiciously at Cheng Chumo when he heard that. However, after weighing his future life and the matters of the past, he nodded his head heavily. "If that's the case, then we can really train it." As he spoke, he cupped his fists towards Zhang Feng and said, "Old Go Zi, Xuanzhu, Guchangzhang, Zhao Xizha." Following Scarface's roar, 4 people who looked similar in age to Scarface walked out from the group of over 30 veterans. These 4 people were no different from Scarface. They looked ordinary and did not have Yu Baoqi's explosive muscles, nor did they have a tall and sturdy body. When the 5 of them stood together, some of them were even shorter than Cheng Tai and the others by a head. Zhang Feng frowned slightly. However, when the 5 of them revealed their scars and strong 8-pack abs, Zhang Feng decisively shut his mouth. He pointed to the armor at the side and said, "This time, we are not training to go on the battlefield to kill the enemy. Have you heard of Kuju?" Scarface nodded. Zhang Feng asked again, "This time, we are using Kuju to train a new type of toy. You can casually bump into people on the field, but the only condition is that you are not allowed to hit people or kick their crotch. Whoever dares to hit people will be disqualified. Then, the field will be divided into 2 groups, the vanguard and the backline. As for the individual selection, we originally needed 15 people, but I only chose 10. As for the remaining people, you can find them yourselves. However, the only condition is that they must scratch, hit, or hammer. Once they do that, they will break the rules and will not be recruited in the future." Zhang Feng explained the rules of rugby 3 times intermittently. Only then did he explain the rules that were similar to rugby. He even personally went on the field to train for 2 hours. Only then did he leave after Yu Shernan's repeated calls. When he took off his protective armor, he rubbed his aching chest and stared at Scarface. "What is your name?" Scarface heard this and quickly took off his armor. "My name is Jia Daoren." "Jia Daoren? Taoist Jia?" Zhang Feng had always admired the naming system of the Tang dynasty, but this time, Zhang Feng was still amazed. He stared and asked, "None of you are called Du Ziting, right?" "Yes." A weak voice came out from the mouth of a man in armor. Zhang Feng rubbed his head and waved his hand. "Continue with the training." "All right, Taoist, let Ma Zhou take the rest of your brothers to my mansion. You will be in charge of everything in the mansion. All right, you have to pay more attention to the place where the 3 old men are. Without my permission, no one is allowed to enter." Cheng Chumo and the others were already panting heavily, but when they heard Zhang Feng's words, their eyes instantly lit up. Ever since this grandson returned to the mountain, it was as if he had changed into a different person. Even a certain place in the resort was not allowed to enter? Could it be that he was hiding something that couldn't be seen? As soon as Zhang Feng left, Li Chengqian instantly screamed and took off the armor on his head. He lay on his back on the ground and wailed again and again. From last night until now, it was almost noon. How could anyone torture someone like this? They didn't know which careless man it was, but he actually took the armor of a general. The weight of the armor was about 25 kilograms. After this set of movements, everyone was already exhausted. At this time, Jia Daoren squatted beside Cheng Chumo. Cheng Chumo also knew what he meant. He glanced at the people playing basketball next to him and said, "Just call me Tai Nyo. On the mountain, everyone is equal." This time, Jia Daoren couldn't sit still. Although he had already known about this situation from Cripple Wang, now it seemed that he really didn't dare to believe it. After all, he had seen the son of the god of slaughter Qing Yaojin in the army. He couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Zhang Feng could actually train a good lunatic to be so docile. "Then I'll respectfully accept." Jia Daoren sighed and said, "Since the dean has asked me to train you, and it's in such a tight time, then don't blame me. I don't know what you were in the past, but now you only have one identity left. Either you're dead, or you're my soldiers. There are only two choices left. Either get lost now and be a rich second generation, or shut your mouth and do whatever I say." "Damn you. You dare to open a dye house just because I gave you some color?" Cheng Chumo was furious. But Jia Daoren really misinterpreted his meaning. He thought that the son of General Cheng Chumo, must have discussed it with Dean Zhangfeng. This time, the matter was more serious, so he wanted him to train them to death. Such a strange request, although it made Jia Daoren a little nervous, but Cheng Chumo had already said that he should do what he should do. He couldn't possibly let this bowl of rice down, right? So, on the other side, with a frosty face, Yu Shernan looked at the listless Zhang Feng and scolded, "Look at what you've done. This is obviously the academy. You actually want to find a person who practices martial arts to teach them? And you even have to wear armor. What is this? It's simply incongruous." Zhang Feng smiled weakly and said, "Teacher, have you ever heard of a saying, 'Only through suffering can one rise above others'?" Chapter 970. Yu Shernan heard this and sighed. "Look at this. Are the barbarians in the barracks celebrating, or are the students of the academy going crazy?" Zhang Feng's face darkened. "What are you talking about? You may not know, but in this mid-autumn hunt, something has happened." Zhang Feng sighed helplessly and pointed at Cheng Chumo and the others. "There is nothing we can do about it, so we decided to do this. Later, the students will go to the workshop and ask them to make a batch of special protective gear. Of course, if you are worried, you can go with the students to the mid-autumn hunt yourself." There were still 4 days left. Yu Shernan was also anxious today. After hearing that Zhang Feng was doing something strange, he hurried over to see what this kid wanted to do. But what he saw almost angered him to death. The time was almost up and he was doing something new. Even if it was Kuju, 3 days of practice might not be enough. Zhang Feng rolled his eyes. Looking at Yu Shernan, who was slightly angry, he said, "Teacher, don't be anxious. Listen to my plan first." Seeing Zhang Feng staring at him with a burning gaze, Yu Shernan could not help but wave his hand. "Anyway, this academy is yours. Tell me your plan." "Teacher, what I'm teaching now is called rugby. Although it's a bit rushed at this time, what will happen if I change it to Kuju? What I am doing is to train their ability to react on the spot, as well as their ability to cooperate. If it is Kuju, even if I don't say it, you naturally know. There is no order to it, and every time Kuju is played, there will be many people's skin and flesh lacerated, and even their bones and tendons will be broken. Do you think there is any order to it? They're all fighting randomly, or they're using brute force to beat the other side down. What's this? This is the behavior of bandits. Kuju was originally an entertainment to strengthen the body, but they turned it into this. It's simply unsightly." Zhang Feng was telling the truth. Yu Shernan couldn't help but be moved. The appearance of Kuju was originally for entertainment, but it gradually developed into a tool for profit and competition. It had even become a tool for those rich families to compete with their financial resources. Where was the meaning of Kuju? That was why Yu Shernan was so angry when he saw how Zhang Feng dressed the students. At this time, listening to Zhang Feng's words, he couldn't help but nod. He had not paid attention to Kuju for a long time. He didn't even bother going to the mid-autumn hunt anymore. The main reason was that during the mid-autumn hunt every year, other than playing Kuju and reciting poems, it was all about competing with each other. Yu Shernan couldn't help but look at the people in the field again. He was really looking forward to it. If Zhang Feng's change this time could change the culture of Kuju in the Tang dynasty, it would be best if basketball and football were added into the mix. Wouldn't that be what everyone wanted to see? Basketball could strengthen the body and train the body. He had seen it with his own eyes during this period. Although it was temporarily ruined by the Imperial College's people, if Zhang Feng could win this mid-autumn hunt, then basketball and football would be considered a success. When the time came, Zhang Feng would invite these people to White Deer College. When these people came to the college, they would first be shown the college's radio gymnastics, then basketball and football. At that time, Yu Shernan couldn't help but feel a little excited. The scene of thousands of people doing exercises on the mountain at the same time was quite spectacular. Thinking of this, Yu Shernan grabbed Zhang Feng. However, after thinking for a while, his face turned red and he said, "Feng, are you sure you can win this mid-autumn hunt?" "If not, why would I go?" Zhang Feng asked in reply. "Well, let me tell you something. Can you explain it to me? Do you mean that you want this group of little guys to train their teamwork skills by playing catenary football during this period of time?" And Ma Zhou and the others asked them to train basketball with the purpose of teaching it to the entire academy in the future? Yes. After hearing Yu Shernan's words, Zhang Feng really had a bold idea. That was to go down the mountain to train, just like the monks in TV dramas. Looking around, he grabbed Yu Shernan's arm and said, "Mr. Bosher, please come with me. I do have a big plan. Listen to it first." While they were talking, Zhang Feng pulled Yu Shernan into the small wooden house again. After closing the door, Zhang Feng said, "Look, I've seen basketball in Chang'an City these days. Basically, many people don't know how to play it. That's what I mean. The college hasn't opened yet, right? I plan to train a group of people and let this group of people train all the students in the college. Then, before the college opens, I'll let these more than 3,000 people go to Chang'an City and let them teach it to everyone in Chang'an. This way, we can spread the correct way to use basketball. What do you think?" Chapter 971. Previously, he had been troubled by a lot of things. Zhang Feng had not thought about how to make the people of the Tang dynasty accept basketball quickly. At this moment, he seemed to have found a way. The main thing was to win the mid-autumn hunt and let the observation group from the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Rights come to White Deer College. At that time, when they went up the mountain, all the students would use the effect of radio gymnastics to promote the popularity of basketball and football. In this way, those who liked gentle people would play basketball. As for those who were reckless and rough, they would play football. As long as they had the strength to break the protective gear, they could do it. Anyway, a protective gear cost 100 strings of coins. In this way, the business would be done. The popularity of basketball and football would not disappear because of the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Rights' disapproval. Instead, it would increase greatly. "Mr. Bosher, I'm going to change all the teachers and students, as well as the teachers and students of Chang'an University, into a new style of school uniform. What do you think? If we're going to do it, we'll make it big. What do you think?" Yu Shernan narrowed his eyes and wandered around the living room for a long time. After weighing the pros and cons, he asked, "Tell me what the school uniform looks like first. If we go to a ready-made clothing store to buy ready-made clothes, the entire Chang'an City would not be able to produce so many things at once. However, if you want to customize it, even all the ready-made clothing stores in Chang'an City would not be able to do it." Zhang Feng did not say anything. He turned around and drew the style, material, and so on. He thought of the school uniform on a piece of paper. The style of the school uniform was made according to the style of the Chinese tunic suit. He even drew the student's hat at that time. Yu Shernan looked at the style that was similar to that of the Hu people and the commoners. He frowned slightly. "What style is this? It's so weird. You don't understand this, do you? This is called beauty. If there's no beauty in anything, what's the point of it? This is also because there's not enough time. If there's enough time, I want to customize a batch of basketball uniforms and a set of football uniforms. If there's a female class in the future, I want to have uniforms for all the female students." Yu Shernan was at a loss. If he were to wear such a costume, then wouldn't he be no different from a commoner? How was this appearance any different from the extraterrestrial barbarians? He did not believe that this was the only way Zhang Feng could think of. He shook his head and said, "No, your idea is very good. The academy must have its own service. For example, Confucian scholars need to wear Confucian robes, commoners wear short shirts, and soldiers wear their armor. This is a principle that has never changed since ancient times. Have you ever seen a commoner wear Confucian robes? This is simply ridiculous. This matter is not under discussion." Zhang Feng's eyes flashed with disappointment. He was still a little too hasty. In this era, there were still some rules about class division and dressing. For example, there were strict rules about sitting, walking, eating, sleeping, and so on. At this time, it was simply impossible for this group of stubborn old men to change their inherent thinking. Thinking of this, the excitement on Zhang Feng's face slowly dissipated. He lit a cigarette and sat in the room. After walking a few rounds, he said, "Teacher, what do you think if we use sky blue as the main color and customize a batch of Confucian robes that belong to us? Although I have a textile factory with this concept here, and I've told Lao Li before that there are 3 major factories. Now there are 4 types of factories: the paper factory, the smelter factory, the rubber factory, and the winery. However, the most important textile factory is also the time to prepare. Textile factory? Tell me about your plan." At this time, Lao Li and the others really haven't told me about it. As for the other things you said, the old man has seen them before. Do you want to use this school uniform to start a textile factory? Yu Shernan took a sip of the pot of tea that Zhang Feng didn't know how long it had been. The main thing was that this lazy guy's furnace was extinguished. At this time, his mouth was abnormally dry. It was too late to start a fire. The most important thing was that Yu Shernan wanted to suppress the hot blood in his heart. He knew that Zhang Feng was keeping him in suspense. However, it was also because of this suspense that Yu Shernan was dying of curiosity at this time. Yu Shernan wanted to refute, but when he thought of the few things this kid came up with that were so shocking, he couldn't help but have a strong interest in the textile factory that he heard Li Yuan mention before. After all, at this time, the Tang dynasty was basically mainly based on silk, ceramics, and tea leaves. And the production of silk, how to start a factory. Did they want to plant mulberry trees in this back mountain? In this case, without 7 or 8 years, how could it be done well? With a stomach full of doubts, Yu Shernan stared into Zhang Feng's eyes and asked, "Fengzi, tell me about your idea. And this textile factory, how do you want to do it?" Zhang Feng smiled confidently and said, "In fact, it's nothing. You know that someone is messing with me now, but at present, I really don't know who is messing with me. We have to find a way. Now that Lao Niu has brought people to Lantian to look for coal mines, this is bound to be related to the Taiyuan Wang clan. And now, basically all the major noble families have been provoked. As the saying goes, when there are too many lice, it doesn't itch. So we might as well take the initiative to leak the spearhead. Aren't they hiding in the dark? Then let's do something big. We will take the initiative to attack from the business, as well as the cultural industry of this academy, and so on. What do you think?" Sitting and waiting for death is not my character, Zhang Feng. Chapter 972. Yu Shernan was so shocked by Zhang Feng's words that he smacked his lips twice. They had come to Shao Mountain not to satisfy their appetite, nor to see how good Zhang Feng was at stirring up trouble. What they valued was Zhang Feng's courage and insight, as well as his unique and innovative teaching methods. They had also seen the problem that Zhang Feng was facing. They couldn't see anything in terms of business at the moment. After all, everything had reached its climax. Even if others wanted to, they couldn't replicate it. This was the trigger for the conflict. If they couldn't do anything to Shao Mountain, what could they do? Wouldn't it be better to destroy Shao Mountain in other ways? Wouldn't this be exactly what they wanted? They couldn't find a Kuju team, so they deliberately delayed the release of the news. Then, they only released the news 5 days before the basketball game was rejected. Anyone would be angry. As for those people in the dark, they were waiting for Zhang Feng to get angry. Once Zhang Feng got angry, there would be a joint report. Zhang Feng publicly insulted the court officials and was dissatisfied with the mid-autumn hunt. Although Yu Shernan and the others knew that Lao Li was the emperor, they couldn't stop these people from gossiping. Even if Zhang Feng chose to remain silent when the time came for the autumn hunt, if the disciples of the White Deer Institute were to lose out, the White Deer Institute would still be shut down. Wasn't this exactly what they wanted? They couldn't do anything to you if you hid on the mountain. However, they just had to destroy everything on the mountain. Wouldn't you come down the mountain? But now? Yu Shinan suddenly realized Zhang Feng's intention from Zhang Feng's plan. He wanted to start a war with the people hiding in the dark. Zhang Feng was really angry. Yu Shinan couldn't help but mourn for Zhang Feng's enemies when he thought of the terrifying weapons in the smelter and what Zhang Feng said at that time. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He waved his hand and said, "Come up with a plan immediately. We'll discuss it with Lao Li later. You just focus on preparing for the mid-autumn hunt. We'll take care of these things." After all, Old Man and the others haven't been seen in the market for the past 2 years. They say that the Old Man and the others are part of White Deer College. They don't even give face to the Old Man. Old Man wants to see who dares to mess with me. Zhang Feng was overjoyed when he heard this. He was waiting for this sentence. As long as the 4 Confucian scholars stood up and supported him, what did he have to be afraid of? He hurriedly bent over the table and wrote down the plan. Yu Shinan asked, "Now tell me, how are you going to set up the textile factory? You can't possibly plant mulberry trees in the back of the mountain and wait 7 or 8 years before you start weaving, right?" I told Lao Li about the textile factory. It's going to be built under the waterfall. We'll build a water wheel there and use the water wheel to drive the linkage. Then, we'll be able to operate hundreds of looms at the same time. Plus, we won't need many people to operate it. Yu Shinan wanted to say that it was a fantasy, but when he opened his mouth, he couldn't say anything. At this moment, Yu Qigong, who they thought had already left the mountain, suddenly shouted at the door. Zhang Feng was so scared that his hand trembled. A good piece of paper was basically scrapped. Zhang Feng complained with some annoyance, "Old Yu, can you F***king make a sound like thunder? I'm fine, but what if something happens to Mr. Bashi because you scared him? Can you bear the responsibility?" However, Yu Qigong acted as if he didn't hear him. He rubbed his hands and walked into the living room. He stared at Zhang Feng with shining eyes and asked, "You said that something like that, can you leave it to my people to do it?" Zhang Feng looked at Yu Qigong, who was almost drooling as he stared at him, and felt the hairs on his body stand up. Old Yu already had a rough appearance. If his portrait was pasted on the door, it would be even more effective than a door god. At this moment, Yu Qigong was excited. The army had always lacked food and clothing. On one hand, it was because of the problem of salary. As long as there was a way to earn money, Yu Qigong would do it even if he had to rob. After all, there were so many brothers in the army who were crying piteously for food. Seeing that it was going to get cold soon, he began to worry about the army's winter clothing. There was a lot of activity in the army, and a piece of clothing would be torn after a short period of time. In addition, they had to move around in the muddy water all year round. Sometimes, they were so sleepy that they couldn't stand it anymore. Many soldiers would wrap themselves in their clothes and lie down in the mud to sleep. A piece of clothing couldn't last for 3 months. It was about the same as the clothes of a beggar. Every year, every season, the imperial court would only distribute clothing and supplies. However, this was basically a drop in the bucket. The amount of clothing that could be distributed in the army was based on the number of people on the permanent staff. In addition to the permanent staff, there were more people than the permanent staff. Outside of the permanent staff, there were people who gathered intelligence for them and sent messages. These people's identities were all hidden. Unless it was absolutely necessary, no one would report their status. The main reason was to protect these people. Therefore, it didn't matter during the summer. At worst, they could just go bare-chested. However, it was impossible during the winter. Every winter, there would be a large number of soldiers who would freeze to death due to hunger and cold. Now that he had gotten a piece of information from Zhang Feng that could allow his brothers to have a good winter, how could he give up on this hope? Chapter 973. The more he thought about it, the more agitated Yu Qigong became. He stepped forward and grabbed Zhang Feng's shoulders. "Brat, let me ask you, what do you think about the textile factory's effects? When will it start?" His eyes were half hopeful, half pleading. Zhang Feng's eyes rolled back. He hit Yu Qigong's hand weakly and said, "Old Yu, can you let go of me first? I'm about to be choked to death by you." Zhang Feng could almost hear his shoulder blades groaning in pain. "I won't let go. If you don't say it, I won't let go even if I die." Yu Qigong seemed to have fallen into a state of madness. His hands were like iron pincers that tightly gripped Zhang Feng. It was as if he would strangle Zhang Feng to death if Zhang Feng dared to say no. Zhang Feng kept cursing in his heart, but he didn't dare to curse out loud. Yu Shinan was also a little anxious. He saw the cold sweat on Zhang Feng's face and his trembling hands and feet. He quickly stepped forward and grabbed Yu Qigong's arm. "Old Yu, old man ordered you to let go. If you don't let go, this brat will die." Yu Qigong stared at Yu Shinan with bloodshot eyes. Instantly, Yu Shinan was so scared that he stepped back and fell into a chair. Zhang Feng was also a little frightened by Yu Qigong's current state. He quickly said, "Old Yu, let's talk nicely. I've been planning for this textile factory for a long time. Lao Li knows about it, but it's still early and I've been too busy recently. Where would I have the time? If I hadn't mentioned the school uniform today. Why? Why didn't you get this thing out earlier?" Yu Qigong stared at Zhang Feng with bloodshot eyes. "Why didn't you get this thing out 10 years ago? Do you know how we survived the winter 10 years ago? You didn't experience the winter of Long Yu Dao, right? At that time, my family, my brothers were lost in the vast desert. In the end, they were forced into the snowy mountains by the Turks. It wasn't that my brothers couldn't fight. If they fought, they wouldn't be a match even if they had several times the number of my brothers. But they were cold. In the end, they were frozen to death on Mount Qilian. When we finally found them, hundreds of people were holding their weapons and our supplies, frozen into ice sculptures. Feng Zi, have you ever had such an experience? If you see your life and death friends when you see Tai Nyo and the others, what?" As he spoke, Yu Qigong cried. As soon as he thought of these Motherf asterisk curs and his brothers who had been frozen to death, Yu Qigong exploded. He said with a hoarse voice, "You are indeed an expert, but so what? Where were you back then? Even if you weren't around back then, why didn't your master take this out? Go and ask around about Long Yu Dao. If it weren't for me, old Yu." Yu Shinan saw that Yu Qigong had completely lost his mind and almost revealed what had happened back then. He hurriedly scolded, "Old man, I know you care about your brothers, but they can't come back to life. Besides, this isn't Feng's fault. Why are you venting your anger on Feng? If you have the ability, go argue with Lao Li." "Ah!" Yu Qigong angrily roared to the sky. The people training outside the door were so scared that they didn't know what had happened. But Scarface, Jia Daoren, had never seen General Yu Qi roar like this before. He couldn't help but feel sad. He also roared, "Continue training. As long as you don't die, go all out." Inside the room, Yu Qigong seemed to have sobered up a bit after the angry roar. He stared at Zhang Feng and continued, "Feng, my tone is a bit harsh, but you really don't understand some things. Haven't you always wondered why we have so much strength? Why people like us can do business? Have you been wondering why our military training can be tested in the Chang and military camp?" Zhang Feng hadn't thought about it. Now that Yu Qigong took the initiative to talk about it, he couldn't help but nod curiously, forgetting the pain in his shoulder. Yu Shinan opened his mouth and finally sighed. He smoked fiercely and didn't want to look into Yu Qigong's eyes. Yu Qigong said as if he was sleep-talking, 10 years ago, we were young men in our 20s. Our families suffered a disaster. I was born a blacksmith. Old He was also born a farmer. But because of the turmoil, we had to join the army to fill our stomachs. We thought that we could eat well after joining the army, but we didn't expect that the darkness in the army was not a place for people to stay. At that time, the army I was in was stationed at the Jade Gate Pass outside Liangzhou. A group of playmates from my village who grew up with me were on their way back to escort supplies when they encountered the Turks heading south. In order to protect the supplies, Yu Qigong couldn't stop his tears from flowing as he spoke. So after that, Old He and I left the army camp. But our brothers couldn't die in vain. That's why we try our best to earn money every year and give them as many supplies as we can. Every time I see those cheering soldiers in the barracks, I can't help but think of my old friend's shadow. So some people always say that we're rough people, that we're boorish people. Why? Who are we protecting with our lives? If it weren't for the border that we used our lives to fill, who the F***ck would be so comfortable now? But why do rich people look down on us? Chapter 974. The more Yuqigong spoke, the more agitated he became. The anger that had been suppressed in his heart for more than 10 years completely exploded at this moment. He shook Zhang Feng's shoulders with all his might, tears streaming down his face. It was as if Zhang Feng, who was in his hands, was the murderer who had killed his brother. Seeing Yuqigong's crazed state, Zhang Feng was no longer anxious or worried. He could feel Yuqigong's heart-wrenching pain, despair, and coldness. He was a person who had seen the most despairing thing in his life, but now he could easily obtain warmth. Under the surging emotions of loss and gain, he actually thought of his former brother. He thought of the tragic state of his brother who had been frozen into an ice sculpture in order to give the resources in his hands to the brother who needed him more and went to protect his home. So, emotions needed to be vented. When something was buried in one's heart for a long time, it would multiply. When it encountered a trigger point, this kind of grief and sorrow would be vented out like a geyser. Just as Zhang Feng was thinking about how to make old Yu let go, he heard a muffled sound. Yuqigong, who was strangling him, slowly fell to the ground. Behind him, the gloomy Cheng Yaojin slowly withdrew his hand knife. It was obvious that this hand knife was made by him. Originally, Cheng Yaojin was preparing to go to Chang'an City. After learning about Zhang Feng's situation, he wanted to go up the mountain to take a look, but he ended up seeing this scene. He also saw the crazed Yuqigong. He was afraid that he would hurt Zhang Feng, so he decisively knocked him out. At this time, Zhang Feng slowly collapsed on the recliner, gasping for breath. His two arms seemed to have no feeling, hanging limply on both sides, extremely numb and itchy. Cheng Yaojin didn't care about the unconscious Yuqigong on the ground. He dragged him aside by his feet and tore open Zhang Feng's clothes. As soon as he tore open the clothes, Cheng Yaojin and Yu Shinan couldn't help but gasp. They saw that both sides of Zhang Feng's neck were swollen, and the places where he had been strangled were bruised. Zhang Feng's arms were purplish-black. Obviously, there was a serious lack of blood. Zhang Feng struggled to wave his hands, but the pain made him grit his teeth. He could only smile bitterly and say, "I'm fine. It's just that my shoulders hurt a lot. I should be fine after resting for 2 days and applying my alcohol. This is a lack of blood. I just need to move around." Zhang Feng saw that Cheng Yaojin was holding his shoulders and his eyes were filled with tears. He quickly continued to say, "It was my fault just now. Old Yu's mind was too agitated. He needs to recuperate. I don't dare to be careless. It's best to ask old Sun to prescribe him some medicine." Cheng Yaojin glared at Zhang Feng and said, "You're too careless. If I didn't come in time, who knows what would have happened? You're in so much pain and you still have the time to care about that old bastard? If you don't win this time, if you don't win the Mid-Autumn Poetry Meet, it'll be intolerable." Cheng Yaojin was somewhat gratified by Zhang Feng's performance. If Lao Li knew about this, then the consequences. He turned his head and glared at Yu Shinan and said, "It's not like you don't know old Yu's temper. When he's angry, no one can drink from him. Just bear with it and watch. What if something happens to Feng Zi? As long as you shout, Lao Tzu doesn't believe that Iron Bull and the others won't be able to do anything to him." As he spoke, Cheng Yaojin angrily rushed to the door. He glared at Cheng Chumo and the others and waved his hand. Then he pointed at Cheng Chumo and the others and scolded, "You guys are Feng Zi's brothers. Just now, something almost happened to Feng Zi in front of you. Don't you guys know? Have all the food you've eaten all these years gone to the dogs' stomachs? And you guys have been in the military for more than 10 years. Are you guys just waiting to die in the military? Can't you see that? Wait, all of you, go and receive your rewards. Everyone will follow the military rules and receive 20 military trophies. If there's a next time, don't blame Lao Tzu for not recognizing you." No one dared to say anything. Now that Zhang Feng was lying in the room, he couldn't see Cheng Yaojin's appearance. Otherwise, he would have been shocked. At this time, Cheng Yaojin had returned to the appearance of the ruthless demon king in Chang. His entire body was filled with murderous intent. Zhang Feng endured the soreness in his body and hurriedly asked Yu Shinan to help him out of the room. As soon as he stepped out of the room, he bitterly smiled and said, "It was supposed to be a happy occasion, but I was deliberately mystifying it and caused a misunderstanding. I've implicated you all. When I'm better, I'll make a table of good things that you haven't eaten before. I'll make it up to you as an apology. How about that?" Chapter 975. Shiwa ran to Sun Simiao's bamboo hut as soon as the incident happened. After a while, Sun Simiao, Ouyang Sun, and the others rushed over after hearing about Zhang Feng's incident. Cheng Chumo and the others put Zhang Feng on the bed in a flurry. However, Zhang Feng screamed the moment he touched the bed. Sun Simiao's face darkened as he glared at Cheng Yaojin and Yu Qigong, who was lying on the ground. Ouyang Sun, who disliked Zhang Feng the most, was furious when he heard that Zhang Feng was in trouble and that the culprit was Yu Qigong. He was so angry that he kicked Yu Qigong's butt a few times as soon as he entered the room. When Sun Simiao arrived, he chased everyone out, including Hai Huai and Yu Qigong. Only he and Zhang Feng were left in the wooden hut. Outside the wooden hut, everyone's face darkened. Cheng Yaojin clenched his fists and sighed in front of the wooden hut with his hands behind his back. He knew Yu Qigong's strength very well. That guy had always been holding a lamb in his hands. He could have crushed it with one hand. How much strength did he have? Could Zhang Feng's neck be stronger than that lamb's head? The meteor hammer was as light as a feather in his hands. What was the weight of other people's meteor hammers? More than 10 caddies were already impressive, but this guy's meteor hammer weighed a total of 40 caddies. With this kind of strength, how much strength could he possibly have when his mind was in turmoil just now? One could tell just by looking at Zhang Feng's neck and arms. If by any chance something really happened to this brat, it would be strange if the emperor and the retired emperor didn't kill everyone here based on their tempers. However, Yu Qigong couldn't be blamed completely. This old guy was also sad because of that incident. Yu Qigong was Niu Jinda. Li Jing and the others had been partners with him for many years. Everyone knew their tempers very well. Therefore, everyone chose not to touch on the matter of that year. Watching more than 700 of his brothers from the same village being frozen into ice sculptures right in front of his eyes with widened eyes and weapons in hand, no one would be able to bear it. This left a lingering shadow in the heart of this man who was made of iron forever. In the room, when Sun Simiao removed all of Zhang Feng's clothes, he couldn't help but be shocked. His face was so gloomy that it was about to drip water. Seeing this, Zhang Feng endured the pain and said, "Elder son, don't be angry. It's nothing." "That's nothing? You're already injured to this extent, and you still say that you're fine? How big is your heart? From now on, don't speak. Old man, I'm going to perform acupuncture. I'll open up the blood vessels in your arms first." As he spoke, Sun Simiao took out his box of silver needles that were comparable to barbecue sticks and was about to stab him. Zhang Feng was so scared that he hurriedly shouted, "Wait a moment. I'll show you something good. Wipe it on your body. This thing can be said to be a treasure. It can reduce inflammation, promote blood circulation, and disinfect miraculously." Sun Simiao didn't want to pay attention to Zhang Feng. He held the silver needle above the oil lamp and was about to stab Zhang Feng. This scared Zhang Feng so much that he dodged repeatedly. "Elder son, trust me this time. How can I mess around with my life? This is something I prepared long ago. This thing is called alcohol. It's a treasure extracted from white wine." Sun Simiao had studied white wine before. As long as this thing was lit with fire and used on people, it would indeed have the magical effect of promoting blood circulation and removing blood stasis. At this time, when he heard Zhang Feng say that there was something good, he frowned. "Why didn't you say so earlier? You should have taken it out a little earlier." Zhang Feng was afraid that elder son would copy old Yu, so he hurriedly struggled to sit up. Then he used his mouth to point at the shoebox he created and said, "It's inconvenient for me to move around. Elder son, please help me take it out." It's in the secret compartment under the shoebox. Although Sun Simiao was a little suspicious, Zhang Feng still couldn't bear to see Zhang Feng sucking in cold air in pain. Gritting his teeth, Sun Simiao poked his head down to look for it. Sure enough, the bottom of the shoebox was pulled out. Sure enough, there was a sound like a door bolt. Then Sun Simiao's hand lifted up vigorously. A secret compartment appeared under the shoebox. There was also a burst of wine fragrance inside. The secret compartment was about half the size of the bed, but there were about 7 or 8 jars of wine neatly placed inside. Sun Simiao glanced at Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng smiled and said, "This is the last of my stock. There's really no more white wine. By the way, the jar with the word alcohol circled with red paint is alcohol. Don't take the wrong one." Sun Simiao didn't say anything. He picked up a few small wine jars that were only the size of a fist next to a big jar. He took 5 of them and put them into his arms. He took out another jar, first opened the mud seal and drank a mouthful. Then he slowly closed the secret compartment and asked, "How do I use this thing?" "Let's use the same method as the white wine trial. Pat it or rub it." Zhang Feng shook his head and said, "Rub it first, and then pat it after the body is hot. The effect will be better. Do you have a smaller silver needle, such as a silver needle as thick as a strand of hair?" Sun Simiao took out the largest silver needle from the box full of silver needles. He looked at Zhang Feng and asked, "No, do you want to prick open the extravasated blood? Or just let him be in pain like this?" Chapter 976. Outside the small wooden hut. Ouyang Sun and the others had also heard the news and came over. When they saw Yu Shernan and the others, they gathered together and whispered, pointing at Yu Qigong from time to time. Yu Qigong was anxious, his right fist pounding back and forth in his left palm as he paced around Zhang Feng's door. At this moment, 1 or 2 screams and groans could be heard from inside the room, causing Yu Qigong and the others to be even more alarmed. If this had happened to someone else, they really wouldn't have cared. But this was Zhang Feng, and it was a huge mistake that he had made himself. At this moment, even Yu Qigong, a man of steel, felt his cheeks turn red. But when he thought of the thing that Zhang Feng had mentioned, Yu Qigong stiffened his neck and felt that it was right. Cheng Yaojin looked at Yu Qigong, then at Ouyang Sun and the others, and then at Zhang Feng's tightly shut door. He couldn't help but sigh and pat Yu Qigong on the shoulder. He could understand Yu Qigong's current feelings. No one would be able to remain calm at this moment. If Zhang Feng's thing was created, what would it be like? It would allow the hundreds of thousands of soldiers in the army to never suffer from the cold again. It wasn't just Yu Qigong. Even he himself was boiling with excitement when he heard about this. At this moment, Zhang Feng's tightly shut door slowly opened, and Sun Simiao walked out with a medicine box. Seeing this, Yu Qigong hurriedly went up and asked, "Elder son, how is Feng Zi?" Sun Simiao glared at Yu Qigong and Cheng Yaojin, the warning in his eyes self-evident. Feng Zi is fine. His shoulders are a little dislocated, and his meridians are blocked and shifted. Old man has already used acupuncture to release the clotted blood and reset his bones. As long as he recuperates, he will be fine. But listen carefully, if you dare to cause trouble again, I will definitely report Feng Zi's matter as it is. Hearing Sun Simiao's words, Yu Qigong and the others breathed a sigh of relief. As long as there were no sequelae, this kid was only 20 years old. After a few days of recuperation and some nourishing ingredients, he would be able to jump around again. In the end, Yu Qigong still held back. Otherwise, would his shoulders be as hard as a sheep's head? Coupled with Zhang Feng's miraculous alcohol, Sun Simiao could only relieve the blood clot on his arm and then reposition it. At this moment, his mind was still filled with the word alcohol. Sun Simiao took a look at the fist-sized porcelain bottle of alcohol that he had gotten from Zhang Feng. He happily went to brew the medicine for Zhang Feng, and while he was at it, he also went to study the gunpowder potion. As soon as Sun Simiao left, Yu Qigong and Cheng Yaojin went straight to Zhang Feng's bedroom. Shiva, who was at the door, pretended not to see anything and went back to training with Chung Chumo and Scarface Jia Daoren. As soon as the 6 of them entered, they could smell the smell of alcohol in the air. They couldn't help but look at each other. There was still some left? What time was it now? Could it be that he was secretly drinking just now? Zhang Feng leaned against the pillow with difficulty. As if he could see the intentions of the four, he hurriedly said, "This is alcohol. You've seen Idiot Way before. If you want to drink, I don't care. But please go down the mountain and drink. I still have half a jar here. It's enough for you to die." Yu Shernan and the others didn't understand what it was. After Qing Yaojin explained, they could only rub their noses and pretend they didn't hear anything. They pointed at Zhang Feng's arm. Yu Shernan asked, "The smell of alcohol on you, is it alcohol?" "Yes, old Yu and the others know. I haven't used this before, but this time, it's all thanks to this thing. Otherwise, this kid really wouldn't be able to escape this time." They couldn't help but criticize in their hearts. Was this thing really that magical? However, Zhang Feng didn't dare to elaborate. There was only a little left of this thing now. If he didn't save a little, he might run into another idiot one day and finish it for him. If he encountered such an emergency, he wouldn't even have a place to cry. Yu Qigong stared at Zhang Feng with red eyes and said, "Feng Zi, are you sure you're okay?" Zhang Feng's face was pale as he grimaced. He raised his right hand with difficulty and instantly grimaced in pain. Then before Zhang Feng could finish, Yu Qigong saw this and began to undress with a serious expression. He also took out the broom behind the door and threw it to Zhang Feng. "Feng Zi, this time I was reckless. You can scold or hit me if you want. But after that, can you take responsibility for this manufacturing workshop? I promise that I'll give you as much as you deserve. I don't want a single cent. However, you should know that many of our brothers in the army don't have enough food to eat or warm clothes to wear. Every winter, many people freeze to death. It's going to be winter soon. Old Yu, really don't want to see the tragic state of our brothers back then. In the end, they froze to death in that place in order to protect their home. In the end, even their corpses didn't come back. Although I'm a businessman now, but..." As he spoke, Yu Qigong had already taken off his clothes, leaving only his undershirt. Yu Shernan and the others were also touched. They looked at Zhang Feng without saying a word. Zhang Feng sighed and said, "When did I say I wanted to hit you? Even if you didn't say it, I would still sell these things. I promise you, I'll let you take full responsibility for this matter." Chapter 977. Yu Qigong was like a child as he walked away happily. Zhang Feng sighed indifferently. Ouyang Sun and Chu Suiliang opened their mouths, but in the end, they left Yu Shernan behind and left silently. Yu Shernan and Cheng Yaojin carried Zhang Feng from the bed to the lounge chair at the door. Cheng Yaojin wanted to say something a few times, but when the words reached his mouth, he couldn't say anything. Zhang Feng also saw the strange look on their faces. He smiled and said, "Mr. Bashi, old Chen, what kind of relationship do we have? If you have something to say, just say it." Old Yu is a straightforward person. Although the first time we met was a little unpleasant, I am not a person who holds grudges. Young man, please don't blame old Yu for this. Yu Shernan smacked his lips and said, "Are you wondering why we, the high and mighty scholars, have such a close relationship with businessmen like Lao Li and old Yu?" Zhang Feng didn't want to know that it was all fake. In this era, among the scholars, farmers, and businessmen, merchants were the lowest position. They were reviled as porters, who bought low and sold high, and so on. But this was the market economy. If it weren't for their existence, how could taxes and the circulation of goods be promoted? However, these scholars were all high and mighty characters. Normally, these merchants would have to salute even if they saw a Confucian scholar, let alone these famous Confucian scholars. However, since the beginning of Chang'an University, the relationship between Lao Li and Yu Shernan, as well as Sun Simiao and the others, was as good as brothers. This made Zhang Feng curious. Zhang Feng nodded his head and said, "I hope that teacher can clear up my doubts. However, I am also very curious. Lao Yu is a frank and upright person. Even if I made such a big joke with him before, Lao Yu didn't complain at all. But today, when we talked about the textile factory, why did his temperament change so much? Also, why would a brother be frozen like that?" With his hands behind his back, Yu Shernan gazed at the dazzling sunlight in the east. Narrowing his eyes, he said, "You might not be aware of this, but I'll have to start from the previous Yangguang army's expedition to Goguryeo. 300,000 soldiers were buried there. Do you think you can sit back and relax just because you're a commoner, a merchant, or a descendant of an aristocratic family? You're wrong. At the end of the Sui dynasty, there were 72 rebellious kings and 36 bandits who wreaked havoc in the world. How could there be a paradise in this world? At that time, old Yu and the others were hot-blooded youths who cared about their country and the world. But what happened in the end? Have you ever seen someone who was so hungry that they could only eat tree bark and roots to survive? Or have you ever seen people who eat rice and meat in order to survive? I've seen it. At this moment, Yu Shernan's entire body was trembling. His face was pale, as if he was recalling those tragic scenes. After a long while, he continued, originally, they were preparing to seek a living because of the disaster that befell their families. But when they saw these things on the way, they were all hot-blooded youths. Which one of them didn't want to quell the chaos and return peace to the world? But everyone has their own ambitions. From that time, we met in Chang, in city, and prepared to work together for the sake of the world. Don't ask how we met. After so many years, what you can see is our present. But what about what you haven't seen? So don't blame old you. At that time, after he joined the army, he was full of mettle. When he returned to the village, he basically brought all the youths in the village with him. But it was also on that winter day that he was stationed in Liangzhou because of military orders. Those from his village were not so lucky and became part of the army. In the winter of the 13th year of the Dai dynasty, more than 30 of his brothers and more than 100 of his village's descendants were attacked by the Sui dynasty soldiers and the Turks who took advantage of the chaos to raid the south. In the end, they were forced to enter Mount Qilian. At this point, Qing Yaojin saw that Yu Shernan's voice was trembling, so he sighed and said, that batch of military supplies was basically the first batch of military uniforms for the frontline soldiers to pass the winter. But how could 100 or 200 people resist 3,000 Turks? There were also Sui dynasty soldiers chasing after them. No one knew how they stopped those people. By the time we received the news, it was already the next day. When old Yu and I arrived, we saw that Mount Qilian was littered with corpses, all of them Turkic corpses. When we reached the summit, we saw that the ground was littered with Turkic corpses that had been tied to trees. Some of the soldiers had bitten a Turk's ear or a piece of flesh to death. Qing Yaojin's eyes were red. His fists were tightly clenched, and his already large eyes were so wide that they seemed like they would pop out of their sockets. Zhang Feng was silent. He stood up with difficulty and deeply bowed to the east. Yu Qigong lowered his head and crouched on the ground, his body twitching. No one knew what sorrowful memories he was going through. Qing Yaojin calmed himself down and said, by the time we reached the mountain, there were only 7 people left of the hundreds-some people. And behind these 7 people were our supplies. And they were still tightly gripping their weapons, their eyes still fixed on the enemy at the foot of the mountain. But their movements were forever frozen. So, Feng Zi, this is a nightmare for everyone who experienced that battle. No one dares to lightly touch it, but today, alas. Qing Yaojin heavily sighed, but in the end he said nothing. There was only silence. Chapter 978. In the end, Zhang Feng still fell asleep after drinking the medicine. When he woke up, it was already the next morning. It was very quiet today. He didn't hear the angry shouts of the students doing their morning exercises, nor did he hear the sounds of morning exercises. It was as if he was in a dream. Zhang Feng's arms didn't hurt as much anymore. They were just a little sore. Under the effects of the alcohol and Sun Simiao's medicine, Zhang Feng's arms slowly recovered. Other than the soreness in his muscles, everything was normal. When he opened the door and was about to call Shiva to prepare breakfast, he was shocked by the scene in front of him. It was still foggy outside the door, and it wasn't bright yet. Zhang Feng wondered what time it was. He looked to the side and saw that Yu Qigong was still sitting in the same place he had been sitting the day before. Yu Qigong seemed to have not slept the entire night. He was carrying a Mo Dao in his hand. When Zhang Feng opened the door, Yu Qigong was about to slash the tendons of his left arm. There were already 2 streaks of blood on his arm, which flowed down his arm. When Zhang Feng saw this, he was instantly shocked. He quickly gritted his teeth and held the blade tightly. With his ruthlessness, if the knife went down, he would be crippled even if he didn't die. People in the military were always straightforward and didn't go back on their words. No one could change their minds once they made up their minds. Ever since Yu Qigong woke up yesterday, he had been very upset. As a stubborn person, he had always felt guilty. He thought that if Cheng Yaojin hadn't knocked him out, Zhang Feng might not have been alive. "Old Yu, if you treat me as your brother, then put down the knife. If you don't treat me, Zhang Feng, as your brother, then chop off my hand as well." Zhang Feng scolded him coldly. When Yu Qigong heard this, he instantly sighed hoarsely and said, "This is all my fault. If I hadn't gone crazy yesterday, how could you have ended up like this? You may have disturbed me, but in my heart, I can't forgive myself. If the mid-autumn hunt is delayed because of me, I won't be able to make up for it even if I die 10,000 times." Zhang Feng hurriedly interrupted him. At this time, Cheng Yaojin, who had not slept the whole night and went to the depths of the Qinling Mountains to hunt a wild wolf, was carrying the wolf meat and happened to see this scene. He hastily stepped forward to dissuade him. "Old Yu, what are you doing? Feng Zi is not that kind of person. Why are you so stubborn?" At this moment, the sound of morning exercises could be heard in the distance. Yu Qigong finally realized that he had been a little petty when he heard those lively voices. His cracked lips parted, but in the end he still let out a deep sigh. Ignoring his bloody arm, he tore off a piece of cloth from his clothes to bandage it. However, he was stopped by Zhang Feng. In the future, such a large wound would require at least a dozen stitches. Zhang Feng pulled Yu Qigong to the living room and disinfected him with alcohol. Then, he used a sterilized cotton cloth to bandage Yu Qigong's wound. Zhang Feng saw that the two of them were staring at the small porcelain bottle in his hand and the cotton cloth that had been soaked in alcohol at high temperatures. He said, "This is the alcohol that I didn't want you to drink to your deaths. It's a good disinfectant. As for this gauze, forget it, let's not talk about it anymore. We'll talk about it again after the biology class." He knew that if he continued to talk about it, the two of them might come up to him and pull his arm and leg, instantly dismembering him. Yu Shinan and Sun Simiao were not here now. After doing all this, Zhang Feng bandaged his hand. After Zhang Feng bandaged it, Yu Qigong looked at the numb feeling on his arm and clicked his tongue in wonder. He waved his hand and said, "I saw that you didn't eat last night, and this old man got another wolf. Today, you have to taste my cooking as an apology. If you don't agree then, fine. I'll agree. Zhang Feng spread his hands and obediently followed the two of them. The two of them did not walk too far. They looked at Zhang Feng from afar. Then, the three of them went around the waterfall and came to the periphery of the farm. This was the place where they used to make beggar's chicken. However, now that the food factory was finished, this place was abandoned and used as fertilizer for the weeds. By the time the three of them arrived, Elder Gao had already built a small furnace made of mud by the stream. The fire inside was burning brightly. Seeing the three of them come, Elder Gao just glanced at them indifferently. Then he pointed to the farm behind him and said, "You came at the right time. Yesterday, when I heard that Fengzi's arm was injured, I sent someone to the foot of the mountain to find a wild lamb for Fengzi. Since you are here, go inside and take out the wine table. Shall we eat here?" "That's great." Zhang Feng had been hungry for a long time. At this time, when he heard that, how could he wait? The few of them quickly pressed Zhang Feng on a stone and sat next to the bonfire to wait. In less than a quarter of an hour, a roasted lamb was placed in front of Zhang Feng. Elder Gao did not care about his heartache and took out a jar of dusty white wine from the house. Zhang Feng, who had been drooling for a long time, was about to take the wine jar when Yu Qigong pressed him on the stone. "You are injured, so you can't drink. Come. Eat more meat to nourish yourself." As he spoke, he took out a dagger that was also studded with gems. He cut off the best piece of meat from the lamb's thigh and placed it in front of Zhang Feng. Without waiting for Zhang Feng to speak, he cut off a fist-sized lump from the meat and stuffed it into Zhang Feng's mouth. Cheng Yaojin, who was sitting side by side, saw this and kicked Yu Qigong out. "Are you King feeding him? Or are you trying to kill Fengzi?" Chapter 979. Yu Qigong glared at Qing Yaojin as he got up from the mud. The meat in his hand was already covered in mud and soot. He was so angry that he threw the meat in his hand at Qing Yaojin. Do you want Lao Tzu to feed you? If you want to eat, do it yourself. Qing Yaojin wasn't afraid of him. He took the meat and deftly stabbed it with a dagger. Then he placed it over the fire and shaved off the muddy parts. He ate with relish. Yu Qigong was so angry that his whole body trembled. Elder Gao hurriedly advised, All right. How old are you? Why are you still fighting over food? It's not like it was 10 years ago. Feng Zi is a cultured person, unlike a barbarian like you. You have to eat properly. No wonder Lao Li always scolded you at home. Look at you. How old are you? What are you still doing here? Hearing that, Yu Qigong and Qing Yaojin sat down angrily. Zhang Feng, on the other hand, had a very satisfying meal. He didn't know how Elder Gao had marinated the meat. There was even barbecue seasoning and a strong smell of pepper and cumin on the meat. Wild mutton had a strong gamey smell to begin with, but after being marinated like that, there was no gamey smell at all. There was even the smell of sandalwood. Coupled with the clear sky after the rain, Zhang Feng couldn't help but eat with great relish. He hadn't eaten properly during this period of time. It was rare for him to be so rough. However, Yu Qigong had to be put aside. That old man seemed to feel guilty. He kept stuffing meat into Zhang Feng's mouth. He would stuff whatever meat was good into Zhang Feng's mouth. Lamb tendon, lamb tendon, lamb tenderloin. Zhang Feng ate until he was about to cry. Most importantly, he wasn't allowed to drink. Smelling the delicious white wine and seeing the three people continuously gulping it down, Zhang Feng was envious. Finally, after Yu Qigong snatched a lamb leg from Qing Yaojin, Zhang Feng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He stopped Yu Qigong. Old Yu, are you trying to choke me to death or stuff me to death? You lost your mind because of your past pain and unintentionally hurt this kid. But this kid isn't a baby, right? Putting aside your age, I reckon that you guys are all my uncles. But thanks for not abandoning me, we've become brothers. I originally planned to have a good chat with you early in the morning, but then I saw you like this. How can I endure this? Hearing Zhang Feng's words, Yu Qigong put down the meat in his hand. He sat opposite Zhang Feng and chuckled. Your words are enough. But of course, you can't accept Lao Tzu's apology. Lao Tzu has been through all sorts of situations in his life. What hasn't Lao Tzu seen in his life? Previously, in the military, there were countless people who died at the hands of Lao Tzu. Even if he was wrong, Lao Tzu used his fists to force him to be straight. At most, he'll pay with his life. Lao Tzu has lived enough in this life. That time at Mount Qilian, he's already indifferent to life and death. When Qing Yaojin heard this, he and Old Gao sighed. Nothing came out of their mouths. Yu Qigong paused, but his lowered eyes were instantly filled with anger. He clenched his fists tightly and said, In my place, people can die of old age, of illness, of being burned to death, chopped to death, drowned to death, scolded and trampled to death. There are many ways to die, but there are only two ways that are not allowed. And that is to freeze to death and starve to death. These are the most despairing and painful ways to die in the world. Lao Tzu has been in this world for so many years. Even though I've left the military, I'm still considered a soldier. And I still hope that my children will enter the military in the future. Yes. I hope that no one will starve to death or freeze to death in the future. I hope that one day, the people of the Tang dynasty won't freeze to death or starve to death. I hope that they can have enough food and clothing. Even if you want Lao Tzu's life, you can have it. Lao Tzu doesn't have a single complaint. At this moment, Zhang Feng finally understood. No wonder Tai Niu and the others are so strong. It's all because of you. But don't worry. Once my textile factory is implemented and the firearms are successfully developed, it'll be enough to protect the people of the Tang dynasty, even if we don't expand our territory. Seeing that the topic had returned to the textile factory, Qing Yaojin said, I heard that you're going to use the waterfall for your textile factory? How many people do you need? Zhang Feng nodded. After all, human labor is limited. Even if they don't sleep for a day and a night, they can only spin 30 feet of cloth a day. That's already the limit. But I have a way here. Yu Qigong and the other two heard this and asked in unison, "What way?" Using the natural advantages of the waterfall, we can make 12 water wheels. Using the water wheel's linkage, we can drive 100 to 300 large looms to weave cloth at the same time. And we only need 3 to 5 people to watch over it. And using the water wheel's linkage, one large textile machine can spin 1 bolt of cloth a day. 300 looms. Zhang Feng's voice stopped abruptly. He stared at the 3 and asked, "How many bolts of cloth do you think we can spin?" Chapter 980. For the next 3 days. Jingshu and Zhang Yuyao once again moved back to the mountain. The main reason was that Zhang Feng was too unreliable. As soon as they left, Zhang Feng was almost strangled to death by old Yu. When the old village head and the old scholar found out, the 2 old men almost used a kitchen knife to skin old Yu Sheng. But fortunately, Lao Li called old Yu to Luozhou in time to deliver a batch of cement. This prevented the old scholar and the old village head from getting what they wanted. However, they once again pushed the 2 women to Zhang Feng. They glorified it by saying that they had to protect the Zhang family's property. Otherwise, if everyone did this, then what would the old Zhang family have? When Zhang Feng's doll came out and asked Lao Tzu for some special skills, what would he, Zhang Feng, have at that time? The 2 women seemed to know about the matter between Zhang Feng and Yu. But the Tang dynasty was good. The atmosphere was simply loved and hated by Zhang Feng. If you said it was not good, then you could have 3 wives and 4 concubines. Moreover, they could get along very well. If you said it was good, then this custom of having 3 wives and 4 concubines made Zhang Feng feel sorry for the 2 women. Today, Zhang Feng woke up early in the morning. Moreover, he was neatly dressed in the clothes of a great scholar. Zhang Yuyao, who was being held by him, was also wearing a rare gorgeous dress. This was given to her by Zhang Sun Wugo. As soon as she appeared, the group of wild beasts present screamed again and again. Zhang Sun Wugo nodded calmly. As for Jingshu, there was no need to talk about her. She was dressed in light yellow with some pink decorations. She looked as noble as an imperial concubine. Compared to Zhang Yuyao's gold-rimmed feather robe, she looked like a fairy who was untainted by dust. At this time, at the entrance of the mountain, Li Shimin, Zhang Sun Wugo sat in the sedan and greeted Zhang Feng. It could be considered as sending him off. Wei Zheng and the others also greeted Zhang Feng one after another. When they reached the mountain entrance, Zhang Feng brought the 2 women out of the carriage. He cupped his hands to everyone and said, "Everyone, there is no need to send me off. This time, it's either success or death. I, Zhang Feng, don't believe that the football and basketball I made can't beat him." Then, Zhang Feng waved his hand. Li Chengqian and the others, who were wearing strange clothes and wanted to go crazy, lowered their heads and faces, read, followed Zhang Feng hurriedly ran down the mountain. In these 3 days' time, Zhang Feng secretly went down the mountain once and found Cripple Wang. He instructed him to make the football uniform. Then, he let Niu Weili use official means to buy 15 sets of leather armor from the army. Overnight, he modified them into the red and white uniform that Zhang Feng wanted. The number 1 to 15 was painted in white paint on the chest. There was also a strange number on the back. However, above this number, there were 4 words that everyone could recognize. White Deer College. Every mid-autumn hunt was held in Lantian. This was a natural place for hunting. It was vast and sparsely populated. The scenery was beautiful. Although it had experienced the erosion of the locust plague, but in this 1 month's time, under the nourishment of the autumn rain, the horn of life was once again in full bloom. The group of people went out of the range of Shao Mountain and headed west. As long as they followed the official road by the Wei River, the next town that appeared would be Lantian. Along the way, because there was only 1 day's time, they met up with the people from the Ministry of Works and Ministry of Rights at the Wei River Bridge. After completing the registration, they leisurely walked towards Lantian. Along the way, they spent another 2 days. In these 2 days, they were basically students from the 2 major colleges, plus students from the 4 major colleges of Hongwen Guan and Chang and University. They also hunted together, cooked together, and so on. There was nothing wrong with other things. 2 days' time passed in a flash. 2 days later, Zhang Feng stood in the middle of an open field and looked around. Li Qingqian smiled and asked, "You're looking for Erpy Gully, right?" Zhang Feng asked in surprise, "Is it here?" Li Qingqian nodded. Hearing this, Zhang Feng hurriedly squatted on the ground and looked at the stones on the ground. "Almost took one? Come over and dig it up to see if there was a coal mine below." Seeing this, Li Qingqian hurriedly dissuaded him. "You'd better stop. As far as I know, this is Erpy Gully, but it doesn't mean that this place is full of coal mines, right? I've already sent someone to inform Old Nyo. Perhaps Old Nyo will come over at night. You should prepare first. We'll depend on you later." Zhang Feng still didn't understand what Li Qingqian meant. Beside a river in the open field between two mountains, rows of tables and chairs were already placed. The students participating in the mid-autumn hunt were all standing upright in their respective colleges' seats. White Deer College and Chang and University stood in their respective seats. Without waiting for Zhang Feng to ask, a boy servant from the Ministry of Works glared at Zhang Feng with a sullen face and complained, "Seeing that this is your first time participating in the mid-autumn hunt, we'll let you off this time. Why aren't you going over quickly? We're waiting for you in the mid-autumn hunt." Chapter 981. Mid-Autumn Hunt. To a certain extent, it was just a formality to let the people from the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Rights know what the students had learned in the past year. The most important thing was to get the outstanding students of the college to meet the people from the two departments first. To put it bluntly, it was to let the people from the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Rights record the top talents in their notebooks first and then report to the emperor. After the imperial examinations 3 years later, the emperor would personally check the papers of these people. The high scholars were basically selected from these people. However, this was not necessarily the case. This was because every year, there would be many people who were hidden away by the college for some reason. They would only be released during the imperial examinations to amaze the world. This was also Zhang Feng's plan. Now, there were so many people eyeing Chang and University and White Deer College. If these people were released at this time, what would happen? The opening of the mid-autumn hunt was similar to the sports events in the future. First, the people from the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Rights would praise the emperor. Then they would encourage all the students and so on. After that, the chancellors of the major colleges would go up to give a speech. Since the chancellors of White Deer College and Chang and University were both Zhang Feng, and this time, the Imperial College and Hongwenguan were on the same side, things were easier to handle. Originally, it was the Imperial College's turn to give a speech. Zhang Feng was prepared to study what these people were talking about. After all, he did not understand these things. It would be a lie to say that he was not nervous. However, this time, the people from the Imperial College knew how to have fun. The two deans stood up at the same time. They smiled at Zhang Feng and said, "We have long heard that young Master Zhang is brimming with talent. Furthermore, there are countless amazing poems that have spread throughout the world. However, these are only one-sided. As everyone knows, as the dean of an academy and the chancellor, this is not only reflected in the Tao of poetry, but also in the Book of Songs and Etiquette. Although you invited the 4 great Confucians up the mountain, we do not know what methods you used. But if you want us to believe you, it's still a little difficult." At the Hongwenguan, a fat man wearing a white robe embroidered with a large character smiled and stroked his mustache. "Brother's son, you're making things difficult for her. President Zhang is a newcomer." "Oh right, she's a great Confucian scholar who was jointly recommended by the 4 great Confucian scholars. We have to be careful with what we say." Cheng Chumo and the others who were listening below were enraged. They almost wanted to beat them up, but they were still firmly held down by Li Qingqian. He knew that these 2 grandsons were going to be unlucky. Zhang Feng laughed coldly and patted Zhang Yuyao's and Jingshu's hands, who were trembling slightly. He got up and threw a punch at the 2 of them, as well as the 2 officials from the Ministry of Works and Ministry of Rights, who had been watching coldly from the side. This immediately made them frown slightly. If this was any other place, it wouldn't have mattered. But where was this place? This was the mid-autumn hunt, and the people who came were all literati. This kind of etiquette was simply a kind of contempt for them. However, the more Zhang Feng acted like this, the more the two people from the Imperial College and the Hongwen Guan smiled. It seemed that the more outstanding Zhang Feng's performance was, the better it would be. Zhang Feng glanced at the two people and couldn't help but laugh. When the two people saw this, they were even happier. Prince Zhang, Lord Chancellor, please. Considering that you're the youngest great Confucian scholar in Chang, and even the entire Tang dynasty, I'll give you the opportunity to be the first to give a speech in this mid-autumn hunt. Zhang Feng asked with a smile, "May I ask who you are?" The Imperial College's chancellor sneered and said, "My surname is Sun, and my name is Yenbo. I'm the chancellor of the Imperial College, grade 5. Oh, Yenbo, hello. Are you sure you'll let me speak this time?" Yenbo was stunned. He didn't know what Zhang Feng meant, but he still nodded and said, "Let's begin. Let's not waste everyone's time. Since Brother Yenbo has spoken, then this humble Zhang will speak a few words this time." Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, "I'm sure everyone knows about the Chang and University and White Deer College, right? The reason why I set up the college was to let the people of the Tang dynasty escape from poverty. I believe that everyone has seen the incident caused by the locust plague. Let's not talk about what White Deer College did. These are all small matters. As long as it can benefit the people of the world, we'll do it. Let's not talk about what the college did for now. Let's talk about, wait." The guy surnamed Sun couldn't stand Zhang Feng anymore. He hurriedly interrupted Zhang Feng and said, "President Zhang, this is the mid-autumn hunt. Let's talk about the mid-autumn hunt." Zhang Feng curled his lips and said again, "The reason why I set up the college was to let the people of the Tang dynasty be illiterate. What I want to say is that as long as you're not blind, you can see that in the Tang dynasty, from the opening of the waterway trade route, to the emergence of the salt-making technique, to the trade with Zhenla, these are the foundations that made the Tang dynasty grow stronger day by day. Think about it, what does a strong country need? What it needs is more people who can read. Don't ask me why I want everyone to be literate. Look at how many barbarian merchants there are during this period. If all of us are the same as before, how can we continue to do business? What does being illiterate mean? It's a matter of a country's reputation. What does a strong country need first? Of course, it's national strength. How can a country's national strength be strong? This involves one of the most basic things of Tao, and that is culture. Culture is the soul of a country. If you want everyone to believe in you, it's not about how many troops you have or how strong your military power is, but how many literate people there are in your country. This is the face of a country. I've calculated it once before. The ratio of literate people to illiterate people in the Tang dynasty is 100:1. That is to say, only one person in 100 may be literate. But this literacy is only in the literal sense. Why is that? It's not that they don't want to, because everyone knows that reading is the best out of everything. But now? What do you see? At this time, the people in the field listened to Zhang Feng's words. They couldn't help but feel a little moved. Zhang Feng was right. When they came to study and learn how to read, wasn't it the same as what Zhang Feng said? Chapter 982. Zhang Feng spoke passionately, and the people standing below were even more mesmerized as they listened to him. Cheng Chumo, who was familiar with Zhang Feng's temper, suddenly understood. Why did Li Chengqian not let him speak before? It turned out that this group of people wanted to show off again. This was simply, when would Lao Tzu be like Feng Zi? That would be great. At this moment, the people from the Ministry of Works, Ministry of Rights, and Ministry of Personnel were all stunned. What was wrong with what Zhang Feng said? Although it was not as cliché as what everyone said before, Zhang Feng's face was flushed red as he spoke. He was so excited that he was almost dancing with joy. As for the students present, they were all fired up by Zhang Feng's words. It was to the point that they were almost ready to jump into action the moment Zhang Feng said what he wanted to do. The people from the Imperial College and the Hongwen Guan felt uncomfortable at this moment. Their faces were full of discomfort as if they had eaten feces. Their expressions were as uncomfortable as they could be. Zhang Yuyao, who was behind Zhang Feng, almost stood up to cheer Zhang Feng. Jingshu's eyes were also full of splendor. Our great Tang dynasty has heroes all over the world. If everyone had a tolerant heart, then our Tang dynasty would not be bullied by others. Since the era of Emperor Qin, look at our martyrs. Which one of them did not straighten their backs and work tirelessly for the rise of our Han people and culture? Emperor Qin unified the 6 states, forged a unified currency, and unified the written language. The Hanwu dynasty was famous around the world for the prestige of our Han people. There was once a classic famous sentence. Do you remember? Those who offend our Han people will be killed no matter how far away they are. What is this? This is the first time we, the Han people, straightened our backs and let everyone in the world see us, the yellow-skinned and black-haired descendants of the Yellow Emperor, stand up. But what about now? Turn around and take a look. Our emperor has created an unprecedented civil and martial arts system. He has also held an unprecedented imperial examination system. Of course, this imperial examination was not created by our emperor, but it was only implemented in our era. Our emperor has created an unprecedented way of spreading the word. This achievement is comparable to Qin Huang and Emperor Wu of Han. And look at the current cooperative and so on. What are these? These are all for our emperor to straighten our back of the Tang dynasty, deter the foreigners, and prevent our people from being bullied. Take a look at all of you. Some people are cutting their way through this path, but there are even more people who are looking at the sea and sighing. But I want to say that it's all pretentious. If you don't act, you won't die. Right now, His Majesty wants to improve, to surpass the Qin Emperor and Emperor Wu of Han. But in the vast country of the Great Tang, there are countless illiterates, and many people are starving. Last year, His Majesty signed the Wei River Treaty in humiliation, killing the white horse. But this is all for the sake of our Tang dynasty's people not to be bullied. What can we do about this? We have to shoulder this heavy burden and contribute to the rise of the Great Tang. That's why some people say that my White Deer Academy is dancing on the brink of death. There are even some people who say that if I pay a little bit of my master's money and find a master, not only will I be able to learn a thing or two, I'll even be able to earn a little bit of money. There are also people who say that your academy is breaking the rules and that the academy needs to charge a high fee to show its status. However, in my opinion, all of this is bullshit. Whether a person is high or not depends on whether he works hard, studies hard, and achievements. Relying on the heavens, relying on the earth, relying on relationships, and relying on parents. What are those? Those are all cowards. In my opinion, such people don't deserve to learn the sage path of Confucius. They should just eat and wait for death. Learn what? Eat and wait for death. Isn't that good? The more Zhang Feng spoke, the more agitated he became. He even said all the things that he wanted to say. This time, Zhang Feng didn't just say it for the students present and the people from the Ministry of Works, the Ministry of Officials, and the Ministry of Rights. He mainly said it for the large number of people outside and the students who were preparing to enter the college in advance to watch the Mid-Autumn Hunt. Every year, the Mid-Autumn Hunt was a show of the country's desire for talents and grace. It was also a time for the country to identify talents in advance. It was also a time for the major colleges to prepare to recruit talents. Because at this moment, all the men of the right age in the Tang dynasty and the surrounding areas would come wave after wave. Even a month ago, they came to watch the hunt. This was the time to show whether the college was strong or not. It was also the time to decide whether the college would be able to recruit top talents in the next 3 years. At this moment, after hearing Zhang Feng's speech, a loud voice shouted from the top of the mountain in the distance, "Good. If one is to be President Zhang, one might as well go home and raise pigs." President Zhang, does White Deer College still want people? President Zhang said it so well. More. One more. More. One more. Chapter 983. At this moment, Li Qingqian and the others couldn't help but be stunned as they looked at the boiling scene. Although they already knew about Zhang Feng's abilities, how could they have imagined that Zhang Feng's words would cause such a stir? The people from the Imperial College, the Ministry of Works, the Ministry of Rights, the Ministry of Personnel, and the Hongwen Guan were also stunned. They had never seen such an opening speech before. They were simply here to snatch people away. Some of them couldn't help but start to panic. However, at this moment, the official from the Ministry of Personnel scanned the sea of people and saw Li Chengqian and the others. Although Li Chengqian and the others were disguised, they often moved around the palace and knew a lot about the situation in the palace. They had naturally seen the current emperor and the crown prince. Although this person looked similar to the crown prince, Li Chengqian was the crown prince. No one could imitate his aura. Therefore, when the official from the Ministry of Personnel saw Li Chengqian, he couldn't help but stand there in a daze, as though he had been struck by lightning. Oh my God, could this be the crown prince? He had long heard that the White Deer Institute was established by the crown prince, and this Zhang Feng was merely a dean under the crown prince. Could it be that this was all true? The official from the Ministry of Personnel couldn't be sure. He hurriedly pulled on a good friend from the Ministry of Works and asked, "Lord He, do you think that person looks like someone from the palace?" The official from the Ministry of Works frowned slightly and wanted to refute. However, when he looked in the direction his friend was looking, he also frowned slightly. He also saw Li Chengqian, who was dressed in white. Although he looked delicate and pretty, he couldn't tell anything about him. Due to their identities, Li Chengqian and the others were meticulously disguised every time they went out. Therefore, although everyone could tell something from his refined movements and expressions, if they didn't interact with Li Chengqian and the others often, even their childhood playmates wouldn't be able to recognize him, let alone outsiders. At this time, official He from the Ministry of Works stared at the official from the Ministry of Personnel in shock and said, "I say, old Xian, are you blind from old age? Wasn't the crown prince always in the palace? Moreover, wasn't it said that he had been helping the emperor deal with some important political matters? How could he have the time to come here and fool around? Besides, the laws of the Tang dynasty." Without waiting for him to finish, the official from the Ministry of Appointments, old Qian, waved his hand with a pale face and whispered into his ear, "Have you not heard the rumors in the palace?" "What rumors?" Master, he couldn't help but ask. "That's right. I've heard people say that His Majesty and the dukes would often leave the palace in disguise. Moreover, White Deer College seems to have been set up by His Majesty and the others. Even retired emperor is the honorary vice dean of White Deer College." When Lord He heard this, his frown deepened. As a rank 4 official of the Ministry of Works, he knew some things in great detail. However, when he heard his old friend say this, he couldn't help but frown. After thinking about it carefully, he heaved a deep sigh of relief. He patted the shoulder of the official from the Ministry of Personnel. "Old Xian, I'm telling you the truth. You're too nervous. If these things were true, why didn't Lord Zhang's son tell us? No matter what, we're an urgent department. If these things were true, why didn't we receive any news? During this period of time, His Majesty and the Crown Prince have been terribly busy because of Chang'an's economy and the market at the foot of Shao Mountain. In addition, Zhena's request for help has kept them busy. How could they have the time to leave the palace? Think about it carefully. Is Lord Zhang's son in the palace or the Ministry of Personnel every day? Have you heard about Lord Zhang's son leaving the palace? Moreover, you said that retired emperor is the vice dean of White Deer College? Aren't you thinking too much? The relationship between His Majesty and retired emperor has just improved. Why would retired emperor come out to mess around?" Lord He patted the shoulder of the official with the surname Qian and smiled confidently. Old Qian, you're really ignorant. This is what retired emperor values the most. Do you think retired emperor will break his own rules and do this kind of thing? Do you think His Majesty and Empress will allow him to do this? Hearing this, the official with the surname Qian from the Ministry of Personnel heaved a deep sigh of relief. Indeed, the rules established by the retired emperor stated that no member of the royal clan was allowed to use any form to side with anyone. Although the rumors about the White Deer Academy were getting more and more ridiculous, even if he was beaten to death, he wouldn't believe that the retired emperor would do such a thing. Hearing Lord He's words, Lord Qian's complexion turned slightly better. The gaze he used to look at Li Chengqian and the others was no longer that respectful. Now that you've said it, it seems that I was really a bit too nervous. However, look at this brat's mouth, he really knows how to talk. Lord He glanced at Zhang Feng, who was talking incessantly and passionately, and nodded speechlessly. At this moment, Zhang Feng didn't notice, but Li Qingqian and the others had already noticed the abnormalities of the officials. Chapter 984. Just as Li Qingqian was pondering whether or not he should react, he saw the two of them whispering to each other before looking at him. They actually just ignored him. Li Qingqian couldn't help but let out a deep sigh of relief. These two sly old foxes were the main participants of this mid-autumn hunt. Furthermore, he had met them a few times in the palace and had also met them a few times in the morning court. If their identities were to be exposed now, it would create a huge hole in his reputation. Fortunately, these two idiots were old and dim-sighted and didn't recognize him. However, this was also a warning to Li Qingqian. If he wanted to hide his identity for a long time, it wouldn't be enough to disguise himself. He didn't understand why his imperial father wanted to bury those things. What would happen if he directly told Zhang Feng? Would that brat be scared to death? At this moment, Zhang Feng's speech came to an end. The administrators from the Ministry of Works, Ministry of Rights, and Ministry of Personnel hurriedly walked forward and invited Zhang Feng down. They really didn't dare to let Zhang Feng continue speaking. They seriously suspected that this brat would continue speaking until the sky turned dark. The three officials waved their hands at the students, indicating for all of the students and the excited commoners to quiet down. Only then did they say, "What Principal Zhang said is extremely correct. It is just as Confucius once said, education is without discrimination." This is more or less the case. However, due to the time constraints, right now, we will no longer pursue these matters, nor will we research these matters. Without waiting for the official to finish speaking, he hurriedly waved his hand and shouted, "This matter isn't urgent. Once this mid-autumn hunt is over, Lantian County is very close to my White Deer College. At that time, I'll invite everyone to my White Deer College as guests. It just so happens that the braised meat, beggar's chicken, and beer were all invented by my White Deer College. At that time, I'll invite everyone to the mountain for a taste. How about it?" After Zhang Feng finished speaking, he added, "Everything will be free." Zhang Feng's words instantly caused a huge wave of cheers. At this moment, the officials from the three parties had already opened their mouths, but they didn't know what to say. You said to refuse, but how could you refuse now? At this time, it was no longer a question of whether they wanted to go or not. The key was that Zhang Feng directly took drastic measures to deal with them, directly blocking their way. The students had no choice but to go. The three of them could only cup their fists at Zhang Feng with a fake smile, indicating that they would talk about it after the autumn harvest. Then, they hurriedly announced the official start of the autumn harvest. Actually, the sales were very simple. The first step was to have the students of the various academies have an academic exchange. To put it bluntly, it was to build relationships and brag. A group of people gathered together. Whoever said the winner would be the winner. Regarding this, Zhang Feng was not afraid of him. Needless to say, Chang and University was full of stubborn people recruited by Chen Tiniu's people. Among the stubborn people who grew up in Chang and City, who could be ranked first in terms of talking. As for Chen Tiniu, the corners of Zhang Feng's mouth curled up slightly, and he mourned for all the students present for a second. Fortunately, this academic exchange lasted for 3 days. Zhang Feng had nothing to do, so he talked with the chancellor of the Hongwen Guan and the Imperial College for a while. However, basically, they were full of sarcasm and even wanted to get to the bottom of things. However, these people also knew that they couldn't win against Zhang Feng in terms of talking. In the end, they could only run away. After that, there was a three-party meeting with the Ministry of Works, the Ministry of Personnel, and the Ministry of Rights, which was a little difficult to handle. Fortunately, Zhang Feng had Jingshu with him. Although Zhang Feng didn't understand these red tape, after watching Jingshu's verbal battle with the heads of the three major departments, it really did bring a lot of help to Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel excited and couldn't wait to hug and kiss Jingshu on the spot. This kind of trivial matter finally ended after 3 days. 3 days later, it was still the same place. All the students stood straight, but the students from A, B, C, and D colleges were basically communicating with their eyes. Some were envious. Some were fearful. Some were unconvinced. And even more fearful. Those with discerning eyes could roughly see that Chang and University and White Deer College obviously had the upper hand. As for the Hongwen Guan and Imperial College, these places were serious teaching places, and all of them were gentle and refined. Who could compete with the big and burly Chang and University and White Deer College? These weirdos. At this time, in the Hongwen Guan and Imperial College, there were some students with obvious bruises and scars on their faces. When they looked at Chen Tinyu and the others, their bodies trembled from time to time. Obviously, they were taken care of by these stubborn people. On the other hand, Cheng Chumo and the others looked straight ahead, solemnly looking at Zhang Feng and the others in front of them, as if they were not aware of those gazes. This made the Hongwen Guan and the Dean of Imperial College gnash their teeth in anger. But there was nothing they could do. Zhang Feng had always been supportive. If words were not enough, then they had to rely on their fists. If your fists don't work, then you're F***king useless. Get the F***ck out. Obviously, Chen Chumo and the others had learned Zhang Feng's true teachings, and they did not disappoint Zhang Feng. At this time, how could the leaders of the three major departments not see through this? But they could only sigh helplessly and announce, "Everyone!" It seems that everyone is quite satisfied with this year's autumn hunt. Since everyone has exchanged knowledge, let's move on to the second segment. Do you see the forest behind me? The 4 academies, A, B, C, and D, will all be separated into several small teams. Each team will have 5 people.